This is a world where wizards are considered the apex of humanity, those who rule over humans from the highest hierarchies. But unlike a normal world where wizards are squishy magic casters hiding behind their spellbooks, this world's wizards are full-blooded warriors, nobles and knights who can level an entire city with just a single spell. Although both of these classes possess magical powers, there is a very fundamental difference between them. Nobles are the direct descendants of the people who descended on Earth to save the humans in old times, or in simple terms, inbred royal freaks, also known as Frieren, whereas knights are the descendants of those nobles whose blood has been diluted through generations and mixed with common humans. As for what those frekas were and why they came to this planet, they were trying to save humanity from behemoths, massive monstrous creatures possessing unimaginable strength and speed, enough to rip through entire armies all on their own. And the only ones capable of stopping these monsters are the wizards, because conventional weapons of this era can't even leave a scratch on their bodies. And one of those monsters just happened to be spotted near a village by the name of Aldenmoor, where the village chief, a weathered old man the locals called Grandpa Robus, was seen warning the villagers to stay out of the forest and to keep their doors and shutters locked during the night, since there was a very real possibility their village might be attacked by that monster. As for his plan to deal with this threat, he assured everyone he had already contacted the kingdom's wizard guild, who had promised them a powerful wizard who would be arriving at their village any day now to take out that monster. That was good and all, but there was something else bugging the villagers. A shepherd who lived all alone on Heir Hill by the name of Turan. The story cuts to a boy lying on the grass with his sheep grazing all around him, and this right here is our main protagonist, who is tired of constantly doing the same boring thing over and over. With nothing else to do and with almost no one ever around to talk to, he was afraid he might even forget how to speak. That was when he heard the voice of an elderly man calling out to him. Turning to the source, he found the same old man who came here to warn the kid about the danger, but judging by his tone, it didn't seem like neither of them liked each other very much. Turns out there's a very good reason behind it. Something messed up happened a couple of years back. At the time when Turan's mother suddenly succumbed to an illness, this old fart tried to take advantage of the fact that he was just a child back then and tried taking over half of his inheritance along with all his sheep. And because of that, the kid never forgave this greedy bastard who uses his sweet tongue in front of the villagers to make himself seem like a saint, because only he knew how rotten he really is. After hearing all those nasty things about him, the old man finally lost it and tried firing back with some half-baked excuses. But Turan just gave the old geezer a glare, told him to shut up, and asked him the reason for wasting his time. Yeah, that glare was enough to make the old man shit himself, so he got straight to the point and told the kid about a monster that had been spotted not far from this place and asked him to be careful. But our boy couldn't care less about something like that, so he asked the old man to leave if that was all he came here to say, which surprised the old man since obviously he is the easiest target for that thing, thanks to all these sheep and the fact that he lives alone. But he quickly lost interest in that and told him to be careful until this whole mess had been dealt with, since a wizard was expected to visit soon to exterminate that creature. And just before leaving, the old man told the kid the only reason he came here was because he was worried about him. But our boy wasn't buying that for a second and asked if he was sure the real reason wasn't that he was worried about all these sheep. After all, if anything were to happen to him, there would be no one left to stand in his way to claim them for himself. Yeah, no, old man wasn't having any of that. But our boy calmly told the guy to get lost, with the reason that his breath stinks so bad that his nose was going to rot. With nothing else to say, the old geezer just turned around to leave. Cut a couple of hours and our hero was seen making his way back to his farm while recalling the old man's words about a wizard who was supposed to visit them soon, and he wondered if he should go and meet up with that guy when he arrived, since turns out he is a huge fan of wizards himself, all thanks to the stories he heard about their powers from his mother, so he always wanted to meet one in person. Just then, as he was thinking that, his nose suddenly caught a whiff of something metallic, and whatever that smell was, it had the kid trembling in fear, because that was the scent of fresh blood. The story cuts to the forest where our boy was seen slowly following the scent of that blood to see where it would lead him to. That was when he came across an unexpected sight. Turns out it was that same old man, or at least what was left of him. But unlike a normal human who would have at least flinched at that sight, Turan started analyzing his body, and from what he could tell, this was no work of any ordinary wild animal, since those slash marks were made by something massive, so that left only one possibility. The one who did this to the guy was a monster. Sure enough, as he finished that thought, he sensed a presence behind him, and turning around, he saw a massive claw emerging from the dark forest. And when that thing finally stepped out and showed itself, our boy found himself standing before a gigantic panther, with dark smoke and electricity crackling all over its body. The story cuts back to the village where a child was seen asking his father about these monsters and if those things truly were as powerful as they say. The answer was a yes, so much so that even the strongest human won't stand a chance against one. But he assured the kid not to be afraid since they have wizards who keep normal people like them safe from these monsters. He told the kid these great beings are born with the power of magic and can easily kill a monster with a single word. Back to our boy, who instead of trying to run was staring at the overgrown kitty with amusement, and after a brief pause he uttered the word die from his mouth and something suddenly happened. As the moment that word left his lips, the giant cat suddenly leaped back, for some reason. And that reason is simple: our boy is actually a mage, and an absurdly powerful one at that, but that is something only he knows. But this time that single word wasn't enough to blow that thing into chunks, so that was something new for him. As for the creature, it used the chance to lunge at the kid once more, but then again our hero just shouted the word stop, and the giant monster immediately jumped out of the way and appeared behind him. By now, Turan was just getting annoyed since neither time was he able to stop that monster with his word magic. As for the thing, it jumped right back again and swung its massive claw to turn the kid into paste. But to its surprise, our boy was way faster than he looked, and he managed to leap out of the way just in time. And since it was now clear simple words won't be enough to take down this creature, he decided to get a little serious. So he picked up a rock and reached into his pocket to bring out something, and that something was a sling, which he was planning on using to turn the rock into a projectile and smash that creature's head in. As for the monster, realizing what the kid was planning, it jumped back at him, but by then our boy was already in position, and using his word magic he hardened the rock even further, after which he paired it with another command to make it faster, and finally a last command to increase its density to pierce through the monster's body, and swung that thing, and boom, that tiny piece of rock turned into a cannon shot flying straight at the monster's head. Next panel, and the creature was seen roaring in pain as the thing shot through him like a bullet, but no, it didn't really go through him. The creature had managed to move its head out of the way at the last second, and thanks to that quick thinking, it saved its skull. And now that our boy was out of options, the thing, without wasting any more time, lunged at him once more to finally end this battle. But what it didn't know was that our hero wasn't done. All of this had been his plan all along, with the real weapon sitting right above the creature's head the whole time. And just as that stupid thing got in range, boom, that thing came crashing down, smashing straight through its skull, resulting in its brain being splattered all over the place. And just as quickly, the entire place fell silent as the creature's lifeless body fell in front of the kid. The story cuts 8 years into the past, when our boy was just a kid. At the age of 10, he suddenly awakened his powers and realized he could do things no normal kid could. Back then, he was so happy that he decided to show what he learned today to his mother, but the reaction he got from her wasn't something he was expecting, because that was the first time in his life he saw his mother being mad at him. But quickly composing herself, she asked the kid to follow her since it was time she told him something important. But before that, she had only one question. So she asked if he wished to live with her, and the kid answered yes, to which the woman made him swear that he would never use his power in front of anyone ever again. And when the kid asked the reason, she reminded him of the old tale about nobles and the knights, and to the kid's surprise, she revealed his father used to be a knight, and the powers he was using were inherited by him. But that wasn't a good thing since, according to her, there are many evil nobles out there who treat knights as their slaves, and she didn't want them finding out how special he was. Cut back to the present, and our boy was recalling that time, thinking to himself how he had upheld that promise for all these years, and was planning on keeping it that way no matter what. Just then, as he was thinking that, he heard banging on the door, so he walked up to check who it was, only to see an ugly-looking man staring him down for some reason. It was far too early for any drama, so the kid asked the reason for the visit. Well, turns out these people came here to beat him to a pulp and drag him back for his trial, and you might be wondering what kind of trial he was facing after saving the whole village from that monster. Well, let me tell you, these people were blaming the kid for killing that old man. Yeah, our boy had a hunch this was coming, but still, he wasn't scared. Instead, he called out to the bunch of cowards who were framing him just to hide their own shame. And when the men asked what he was talking about, the kid told them they were trying to pin the old man's death on him because they were too ashamed to admit the truth. Instead of the town's strong young men, it was an old man who went out of the village to warn a lone shepherd boy about a monster, because the men of the town were too cowardly to step into the forest, and they didn't want to admit this to anyone. So they came up with this story that a human took out the old guy and not a monster. Yeah, that was exactly the case. So the ugly bastard clenched his fist to knock his teeth in. But our boy just leaned back and slipped out of the way as if it was child's play for him. And using the momentum, he headbutted the fool right on his nose, and his face literally caved in from the impact. Seeing their friend screaming like a bitch on the ground, the rest of them started charging in. Instead of trying to run, Turan whispered the word fall over, and the fool in the front suddenly face-planted on the ground. But since he was trying to hide the fact that he was a mage, he decided not to rely too much on magic. Instead, he used his fists and the brute strength he inherited from his father and bashed the wooden stick right on the man's head. But since he wasn't done with the guy, he spun him around and, using him as his meat shield, blocked several more strikes from his own friends. That gave him the opening he needed to use his own fists. So he clenched his fist, and the next thing everyone saw was wooden sticks flying all over the place. Cut a minute or two, and the kid was dusting his hands after a good warm-up for the day. That was when he spotted some ladies standing to the side, so he asked if they came here looking for a fight as well. Well, turns out they did, but instead got rizzed up after seeing their husbands getting their ass handed to them by a real man. But the boy couldn't care less, so he told the hoes to grab their trash and leave his mountain. After a while, he was seen walking back to his room to get a shower since he was all sweaty after that workout. And while doing so, he couldn't help but think how these people are going to try and make things difficult for him when he goes down to trade stuff at the market. But still, not like he was worried. He could always beat some sense into them until he gets a good deal. Just then, he heard someone knocking at the door again. Furious, he opened the door asking if they didn't learn their lesson yet, but instead saw a new face standing outside his home. Seeing him making that stupid face, the man apologized for showing up at the wrong time and got ready to turn around and leave. But our hero told the man to stop and apologized for screaming at him earlier, and when asked what he wanted, the man answered he was a traveler who was looking for a place to stay the night and came across his home. Just then, our hero's eyes landed on his sword, which looked expensive, and that got him wondering what business a traveler with a sword could have in a rundown town like this in the middle of nowhere. So he initially tried to turn him away, but then he heard the man's stomach growl, so with no other choice, he allowed the guy to spend the night at his place. After a while, the man was thanking the kid for the delicious meal, saying how it had been days since he had anything decent to eat. Turns out they had been talking for a bit, so the man found out our hero had never left this little town, so he asked the reason. Our boy told him the whole story, how he used to live with his mother and all, and after she passed away, he took over their farm and started looking after the sheep, so he never got the chance to leave that place and see the world. In the middle of all that, the man noticed something strange about the kid, and that got him curious. So he asked about his parents, since he had been in many places and knew for a fact not many people living in a small town have such refined manners. But the kid told him both of them were gone, and he didn't want to talk about it any further, so the man didn't press him. After they were done eating, the man thanked the kid once more for his hospitality. By then, our hero himself was curious about something, so he asked the reason for his visit to this small town. Well, turns out this man is the same wizard that old man was talking about, who was supposed to take out that black tiger, but turns out someone else got to that creature before him. With that out of the way, the man asked if he could also ask a question, to which our hero didn't mind. So he told the kid he could sense the presence of a monster from this place but doesn't see one, and asked if he could tell him anything about it. But that wasn't the only weird thing he noticed about this whole setup, because even after knowing the threat of that monster, the kid never ran away from this place, so he asked the reason since he would be the first target for that monster, given how far he lived from the main town, and that fact was bugging him, since he seemed awfully brave for a shepherd who had never left this town, and after he was done saying what he had to say, he asked the kid what he was trying to hide from everyone. But almost immediately, that same smile returned to his face as he apologized to the kid for messing with him, telling him to cheer up since that was just a joke. Yeah, good thing he said that when he did, because our hero was literally thinking of ending this guy, fearing his secret got exposed. So he apologized to the guy for misunderstanding him, saying he wasn't very good with humor. The man said the same thing and apologized since he never meant to scare him like that. After that weird moment was over, he extended his hand and introduced himself as Karen, a wandering knight. Our boy shook his hand and told the man his name was Turan, just a shepherd who turns 18 this year. Cut a couple of hours, and both of them were continuing their conversation, with our hero pointing out how he doesn't look 75 no matter how he looks at it. So the man explained to the kid that wizards age more slowly compared to an ordinary person, which was why they also live very long lives. This was all too fascinating for our hero, since before this day, he had never met a person he could talk to like this, so he asked about his story and how he ended up becoming a wanderer. The man answered that he used to serve a family named Arabian and spent 70 years in their service, but in the end, he left because he wanted to spend his later years roaming from place to place without settling down. With that, they continued chatting, with Turan, for the first time in years, actually enjoying himself in the company of someone who wasn't trying to take advantage of him or hiding any ulterior motives, and before they knew it, it was already the next day. So the man got up and prepared to leave, since he still had some unfinished work in this place he needed to deal with. And as a thank you, he placed an Arabian silver coin in front of our hero, which according to him was the purest among silver coins. As thanks for his hospitality, and our hero gratefully accepted the coin and wished him good luck on his journey. But the man told the kid this wasn't a goodbye, since he enjoyed himself so much in his company that he was planning on visiting him again on his way back after he was done with his job. Cut a couple of hours, and we are now outside in the beautiful pasture filled with sheep. That is when our hero stepped out and, using his word magic, he commanded all the sheep to gather, and all of them started walking up to him. But there was something different this time. Unlike before, he was feeling genuinely happy, and after seeing what a kind and honest person Karen was, he started to wonder if he was wrong about wizards being emotionless hunting dogs who are used by arrogant nobles. Still, there was another thing that was bugging him, and he wondered if he should have told the guy that there are no more monsters left in High Surel Hill. Cut to Kjorn, who was wandering around the forest looking for any traces of a monster's nest, but found absolutely nothing. Although he did notice some traces of a battle, there was no presence of a monster in the air, and that got him wondering if another wizard got to the thing before him. That was when his eyes landed on a rock that was lodged into a tree near him, and that had him thinking what kind of wizard could pull off something like that. But he quickly lost interest since at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that the monster was gone and the people of this area were safe. Just then, as he was thinking that, he felt a terrifying presence approaching him, so he quickly turned to the location, only to find a massive claw of a monstrous creature appearing from the woods, and yeah, that's one nasty-looking sight, all right. Turns out there is more to these creatures than our boy had thought, since even having half its head blown away, the thing was still alive. But according to Kyorn, yeah, that thing wasn't alive at all but undead, or in simple words, that thing was something they called a wraith. And that made no sense to him because who in their right mind would do something like this with a monster? As for the creature, it wasted no time and swung its claw to turn him into mush, but Kyorn quickly snapped out of his daze and leaped back. Well, turns out just taking out these monsters isn't enough to get rid of them, because even a normal human can pull it off if he uses his brain. The main reason wizards are needed to deal with these creatures is because after the monster has been defeated, only a wizard has the power to absorb or disperse the mana from a dead monster's corpse, and that is the most important part of the whole process, because if that step is skipped, the creature turns into a wraith. And for this specific monster, this creature is at a level that no way someone other than an experienced wizard could have taken it down. And that was the thing that was bugging him, since why would a wizard who hunts these things for a living make such a rookie mistake and leave it to become a wraith? But there was no use thinking about it, so he got ready to end the thing using his fireball, and somehow he turned it into an arrow instead. And just as the creature got in range, he released the projectile. But here is the thing, Kyorn is weak as fuck, because the creature just let out a roar and his attack dispersed into nothing. And this was something he wasn't expecting, since this creature was even stronger than he had thought, and he wondered just what kind of wizard was able to take it out when it was still alive. As he was thinking that, the creature suddenly turned into some dark liquid and vanished. And no, this isn't because the thing was trying to escape or anything, but because it was trying to counter magic with magic. While looking around, Kyorn failed to notice that the thing was hiding inside his own shadow, and using that chance, it raised its massive claw and swung it toward the guy, managing to land a powerful hit on his shoulder. Luckily, Kyorn was able to move just barely enough to save his vital organs, so he was pretty much unharmed, but the same couldn't be said about his left arm because that thing was completely fucked. And to make it worse, his fatigue was catching up to him, and he knew he needed to find a way to end this quickly, otherwise he wouldn't make it out alive. As for the creature, I don't even know how to describe this because the thing was somehow even more hideous than before. Realizing that this might very well be his end, Kyorn decided to use his final trump card, which was to blow himself up along with that hideous-looking thing. So he started concentrating all his mana in the palm of his hand to use it to create a powerful explosion. Seeing him do that, the creature itself lunged at him to stop the guy before it was too late. But by then, Kyorn had already finished charging the thing, so he swung his own fist, and just as both sides were about to collide, something strange started happening, as a bright blue light shot in from the distance and struck the creature's massive arm, tearing it right off its body. That obviously startled Kyorn, since this was the same monster he wasn't able to scratch, yet somehow it got taken out with just one hit. Before he could ask who saved him, he heard a familiar voice asking if he was hurt, so he turned to the location and saw our boy walking out of the forest. Yeah, that was the last thing he was expecting to see in this rundown town. So he asked the kid the reason for keeping that fact hidden from him, and our hero didn't know how he was supposed to answer that question. So he changed questions and instead asked why he blew his own secret by helping him, since he could have just walked away and no one would have known anything. Cut back to the time our hero was conversing with the guy, when he asked the reason for risking his own life for others. After all, with his skills and knowledge, he could easily live a life of luxury and comfort. The man answered that he was right about that, but still, he had a duty. And as a wizard who was born with these powers, he believed he should live his life with pride and protect powerless commoners from monsters. But he did point out that not every wizard he comes across in the future would have the same beliefs, since everyone has their own values and their own way of living. Back in the present, our hero, after recalling those words, told the man the same thing, that everyone has their own way of living their lives. Just then, as he said those words, an explosion rocked the place and both of them leaped out of the way just in time. Well, what do you know? That damn thing is tougher than they had thought. So Karen told the kid to run since that thing was on a level neither of them could handle, and asked him to tell the villagers what he saw here, and asked them to call for a noble, since only they have the strength to stop something like that. As for him, he would try to buy him as much time as possible. Although he said all those heroic things to look cool, he still wasn't confident he would be able to hold it for long, so his plan was the same: blow up that monster with his own body and hope that might be enough to stop it. But to his surprise, he heard the kid say there was no need to do that. Confused, the man asked what he was trying to say. Yeah, the guy realized right there and then that the kid in front of him was holding back on his last attack, and that made zero sense, since how can a young knight hiding out in the mountains be so confident in taking out a monster which even multiple nobles would think twice to go up against? And at that moment, the veteran knight Kaorn's thoughts started racing after seeing what the kid was capable of, because what he was witnessing wasn't just some random encounter in a forgotten village, nor was this the reckless bravado of a young knight who ran from nobles. What stood before him was the beginning of something great, a wizard in the making who had no idea just how far he would go, since he was destined to turn the world of wizards upside down. Fuck, I don't usually say this, but who else thinks this is peak? I'm getting goosebumps just reading this. Well, anyway, the kid was really excited about the whole thing since before this day he never got a chance to let loose, so he was curious to know the limit of his power. But Kieran wasn't planning on letting him take on that creature on his own since that thing was no joke. Before he could finish that sentence, the creature's massive claws were already next to his face, and just as he was about to be turned into paste, our boy smashed the thing with another one of his rocks. At that moment, Kieran realized he was nothing but dead weight right now, since if it weren't for the kid stopping that thing just now, he would have been lying in a puddle of his own blood. So in the end, he decided to just step back and not get in the kid's way, and see just what that kid is capable of. As for Turan, he noticed something off about the whole situation, since no matter how many times he attacked that monster, it felt like he wasn't dealing any damage to it. That was when he heard Kieran's voice telling him he can't kill a wraith with physical attacks. Surprised, the kid asked what he was supposed to do if that was the case, and heard the guy telling him to use fire instead. Our boy did as told and created fire on the creature's shoulders to try and stop it, but then again nothing happened. The thing kept advancing. Watching the whole scene, Kieran couldn't help but wonder what was going on, because this was basic knowledge among wizards on how to deal with a wraith, but for some reason this kid was acting like he knew nothing. And then it finally hit him, and he realized Turan was the one who took this creature out and left it alone, and it turned into a wraith, which would mean that the kid in front of him has never absorbed mana his entire life, which was just absurd, because how can someone who has never absorbed mana from a monster possess such powerful magic? But since this was not the time to stand around thinking, he shouted for the kid to form a fireball in his hand and then throw that thing toward the monster. Hearing that, Turan got to work, but Kaom wasn't sure if this would work, because creating fire on an object was easy, but manifesting it in one's hand was a completely different thing, since controlling an element requires years of training and control. Yeah, no, our boy didn't need any of that, because on his first try, not only did he summon fire in his hand, but he did it perfectly. And then boom, he hurled the thing and blew it right on the monster's face. And the attack proved super effective since the creature started writhing in agony. And before they knew it, the thing was rolling on the ground trying to put out the fire. Realizing what the creature was trying to do, Kieran shouted for the kid to keep pouring his mana into that fire so it doesn't go out, because he needed to burn everything about that creature to make sure it doesn't come back. Before long, the whole place had fallen silent, with only the crackling sounds coming from the creature's charred body. As for Kieran, the guy was staring at the whole scene in disbelief, unable to believe that a rookie shepherd managed to solo a monster that even a noble would have trouble dealing with. As for the kid, he casually turned to the guy as if this was no big deal and asked if they were done here now. Snapping out of his thoughts, he told the kid they still had one very important step to complete, and that was to absorb that creature's mana. Otherwise, there was a chance it might come back to life again. But since our hero had no clue how to do that, he instructed him to imagine if he was absorbing something into his body. So our boy did. And not long after that, a green mist started to seep out of that monster's body and started entering into our boy through the palm of his hand. Just as that happened, he felt a sudden surge of power coursing through his veins, and this was something he had never felt before. As for Kieran, seeing the kid's expression, he was certain this was his first time absorbing mana, and he was having a hard time believing it even after seeing it with his own eyes. And after piecing everything together, he came to a realization. So to confirm it, he called out to the kid, and bowing his head slightly, he asked which noble house he belonged to. At first, the kid had no clue what the man was trying to say, but after a brief pause, he opened his mouth and told the man he was going to bleed out if he didn't do something about that wound on his arm soon. Fast forward, and both of them were back, with Kieran all bandaged up, and he was still convinced our hero was from a noble family who was hiding in this place to live peacefully, so he apologized for his earlier rudeness and for putting him through all this trouble. By then, our boy was getting really annoyed by how the man was addressing him, so he reminded the guy not to treat him like some noble, since he was no esteemed anything, and suggested he stick to calling him a shepherd boy. The man apologized, but still, he was curious to know why a wizard such as himself was wasting his days living in this rundown farm. This time, our hero decided to come clean and told the guy how this was his mother's request, right up until the moment she died. Kieran couldn't understand why she would make such a request, so he asked the kid. Our boy told the man the same thing she had told him all those years ago, how wizards are nothing but mere tools to nobles who use them for their own gain, and when their purpose is fulfilled, they toss them aside. Surprisingly, the man agreed with that view and commented on how his mother was a wise person. That surprised the kid since he was expecting to hear something like his mother was an overprotective parent. So Kieran told the kid his mother wasn't completely wrong. He explained that wizards possess great power, but that isn't always a good thing because that kind of power inevitably brings conflict. He told the kid about a war that was fought 20-some years ago between two great noble houses, one named the House of Arabayan, which he used to serve, and the second, the Great House of Zahar, and that war claimed the lives of many great people. In that war, 3,000 knights participated from the side of the House of Arabian, and out of those 3,000, nearly a third of that number died, and as it turned out, everyone close to him was in that third, one of the people being his friend named Denir, whose dream was to open a shop in the city after the war was over, his teacher named Hartman, and even his beloved wife and son, each and every one of them massacred by House Zahar, which was why he agrees with his mother's decision, because a knight's life can vanish more easily and more meaninglessly than a commoner's. But there was one thing she was wrong about, and that was his aptitude. That was probably the first time he even heard of that word, so he asked the man what that was. To put it in simple words, the kid was a prodigy, and although he was ashamed to admit that he, being a knight with years of experience, got outclassed by a rookie like him, he told the kid his potential wasn't that of a mere knight. He was at minimum on the level of a noble, and even then, among the upper tier in aptitude. Confused, the kid asked how something like that could be possible, since he was certain his father was just a knight. Karoan explained that in some rare cases, it's possible for a child worse than a knight to be born among nobles, or the other way around, a powerful noble-class child can be born among knights. After he was done speaking, he got up to leave, but before heading out, he suggested to our boy that he reconsider his decision of living his entire life in this rundown home. Instead, he asked him to go out into the world, and when our hero asked why, Karon answered this world is in desperate need of more nobles and knights, and the reason was that humans are still not the complete masters of this world. Turns out several millennia ago, humans weren't the only race that used to exist on this planet. There were others, but for something they did, they were punished and driven out, but they weren't completely annihilated. And what remains of those races is constantly keeping a watch on this world, waiting for a chance to rise again. And now, in these times when the nobles who have forgotten their purpose are busy fighting among each other, the balance is starting to break, and that is exactly why this age is in desperate need of strong and kind nobles like him. Well, that's just one of the reasons. The second reason is that he can tell just by looking at him that he himself isn't satisfied living as a shepherd. Yeah, the kid knew the man wasn't wrong, so he asked what could he gain if he decides to leave this mountain. Karon didn't have an answer to that question, but the possibilities were endless. But more importantly, he asked the kid to ask himself what he truly desires. It could be anything: wealth, fame, authority, family, or even friendship. Or perhaps he wished to become a simple wanderer like him, who ventures into the unknown and goes around destroying monsters that threaten people. After which he turned around, telling the kid to think over what he said, because he has the potential of being adopted into a great house and walk the path of power. Just as he was about to leave, he heard our boy's voice asking him to stop. Turns out our boy agrees with what he said, because he wasn't satisfied with his current life and wanted something more interesting than herding sheep all day. On top of that, after meeting with him, he has grown a lot more curious about the world outside and wants to see it with his own eyes. With a smile, Karon told the kid he made the right call and assured him that he was going to support him in every way he could. But first, he wanted to know about his bloodline ability, but then again, our boy had no clue what that was. Karon apologized and explained it was something special, which a noble awakens at birth, like a trait they inherit from their ancestors, and this ability is also the thing that sets a noble apart from a knight. He asked if he has any spells that feel unusually easy to cast or some outstanding ability he has that doesn't need him to use magic. Since our hero was far stronger compared to a normal person, he asked if that could be it, but the answer was a no, since just having mana can make a wizard's physical abilities stronger. So our boy told him about his unusually sharp sense of smell and also his ability to control rocks using magic. Yeah, Karon wasn't too sure about that. As for the rock throwing, that was a pretty common trait, so it was hard to consider it a bloodline ability, so he asked the kid to continue and tell him what else he could do. Yeah, by the time he was done, he noticed Karon's expression shifting for some reason, so he asked if everything was alright. Well, it turns out everything wasn't alright, because he finally figured out which house his ability was closest to, the great house known as Pursuers or Hunters, named Zahar, the same house that murdered his wife and child. The kid didn't know how he was supposed to respond to that, and the fact that the guy was suddenly looking all gloomy after realizing he belonged to an enemy family made it even worse. But he also knew staying silent would only make things worse, so he wondered if he should apologize to the man for what had happened to him. But before he could, he heard the man calling out his name, and when he answered, the man patted the kid's shoulder, telling him not to make that face because he had nothing to do with anything that happened back then. He explained that he was still a child and that this matter was between adults. As for him, he didn't believe that washing blood with blood would solve anything. On the contrary, it would only create more bloodshed. Our boy asked the man if he regrets his decision now, but Kiorn didn't know what he was talking about. So our boy answered, saying his decision about telling him to go down the hill and grow his strength. The man agreed there was a really high possibility that if he did that, he would inevitably end up joining the Zahar family. After all, a prodigy like him only appears one in a generation. But despite that, he trusts his character. He reminded the kid he saved his life and even risked everything by choosing to reveal his secret in front of him, so he believed he was a good kid, which is why he thought it would be a good thing if he joined the Zahar family, because if someone like him rose to a high position within it, perhaps he could help prevent another terrible war from happening again. Still, no one knew what the future held, so there was no way to tell for sure if he would end up joining the Zahar family or not. Just then, our hero asked the man to stop, and when he turned around, he heard the kid say he was now even more determined than before to go down this mountain and find his new purpose. But before that, there was one important thing he needed to take care of, which was to wait for his injuries to heal, meaning neither of them were going anywhere. After a while, they were back in the house, with the old man teaching some of the basics about magic to our hero. He told the boy mana was the most important thing for a mage, and the amount of mana one can store in their body determines their overall strength. He told the kid that the difficulty of magic or casting a spell is largely determined by 3 factors. First is bloodline, second is affinity, and third is causality. The first one is pretty much fixed for everyone, since a mage is born with it, and it is only present in nobles, not knights. To further explain bloodline, he showed him his arm and asked how easy was it for him to heal a wound like this, and our boy answered not easy at all. So he told him about the Ravista bloodline from the south, whose bloodline allows them to heal something like this without any training or effort. So that is the power of a bloodline. After understanding that part, he asked about affinity. To make it easy for the kid to understand, he reminded him how, back when they were fighting that monster, he manifested that fireball without any effort. It was because his magic affinity to fire attacks was high. As for the last thing, which was causality, it was something difficult to explain for him as well because he didn't completely understand it either. So he asked the kid a question. What if he was trying to delete someone using mana? What does he think would happen? And the kid answered, some light would shine from his hand and that would be it. The man told him that's exactly the issue, because just wanting something to happen doesn't make it happen. You need something that actually causes it. If there's no cause, then there's no result. And the bigger the thing you're trying to do, the more it needs a proper cause. The kid thought about it for a second and said he thinks he understands causality a bit now. If he wanted to kill someone, he couldn't just burn mana and expect them to drop dead. He would need an actual cause, something that leads to death, like creating flames and using those flames to kill them, because creating and shooting fire to attack someone is more natural. Yup, not sure if you guys got my explanation, but that's how causality works. Use magic to create something like fire or lightning which can harm a human body. And no, this fact wasn't for dealing with ordinary humans but magical beasts, because simple word magic can easily work against humans. So our hero asked the man how come his word magic works against his sheep whenever he wants to gather them around or give them orders, but not a magical beast. The man answered it was because those things possess mana, which was something not present in normal animals. After he was done explaining those things to the kid, he asked the man about his special bloodline and what kind of traits came with it. Kiorn answered that the Heir bloodline was exceptional in stealth and tracking, and asked the kid to give it a try himself. Our boy closed his eyes and told himself to be invisible in a way that no one could see, smell, or detect his presence. As soon as he thought that, his body started getting covered in white mist, and within seconds the kid completely vanished from the room. Although the man was happy the kid managed to pull it off on his first try, he still felt a little scared, realizing how powerful this boy truly was. On top of that, this skill brought back some unpleasant memories from that time. As for our hero, he undid the spell and became visible again, and heard the man comment how it had been a while since he had seen someone use that skill, and how it was just as frightening as it was back then. Turns out, back in the day, this was the one ability every Arabian knight feared, but he did warn the kid not to rely too much on it since it wouldn't make him invincible. So he needed to read the situation and act accordingly. But changing topics, he got ready to teach him some magic training methods. But our boy asked if he really thinks teaching so many things to an enemy family's mage was a good idea. The man reminded him what he said earlier. He saved his life and even treated his wounds. And most importantly, he trusts his character. The story fast forwards to an ugly-looking guy who was shocked to hear some news. Turns out this man is the new town elder, and our boy came to him to sell all of his sheep, and the man wasn't happy that the kid decided on something like that without consulting them. But our hero couldn't give a rat's ass about consulting with them, so he told the man to stop wasting his time, since what he does with his life is none of their concern. The only reason he came to town was because he needed to sell his sheep, but if they weren't willing to give him a good deal, he just released them all into the forest, and asked if they really wanted that, since he was sure they didn't want to go into that dangerous place for a bunch of sheep. Yeah, the old man knew the kid was right about that. With all those monsters lurking in there, no way anyone would be foolish enough to go after some sheep like that. So in the end, he agreed to pay the kid a good amount. After a while, he was seen walking out of the town with old man Kieran. That was when he remembered those people still hadn't paid the reward money to Kieran for the monster he took out, and offered to go back and get it for him. but the man told him not to sweat it since he never had any intentions of receiving anything, and more importantly, it was the kid who took out that monster, not him. With that, they arrived at a fork in the road, the place where both of them were meant to part ways, and the reason was because the old man refused to tag along on the kid's journey, since he had his own things to take care of. But our boy didn't complain, and thanked the man for everything he did for him, and with that, both of them bid their farewell with one final wish, that one day they would be reunited once more with the same smiling faces. And so the kid stood there, watching Kieran walking into the distance in silence, and at that moment he finally realized something. The reason he never wanted that old knight to speak to him formally. Although he never lacked affection from his mother in his life, deep down the boy had secretly been yearning for a father figure, someone who could be a role model for him for what kind of a man he should strive to become, and maybe Kieran was that role model he had been waiting for all these years. The story fast forwards to a desert, where a lone figure was seen making his way across the dunes, and that figure was none other than our boy who, while walking, came across a couple of people who seemed to be traveling merchants going from village to buy and sell items. So he waited for the men so he could ask for directions. The men themselves were surprised seeing someone blocking their path, so they asked for his identity, to which the boy told them he was a traveler and asked if they could point him towards the nearest city. The men told the kid to keep following the road they came from and he would reach a city by the name of Murray. Our boy thanked the men and prepared to leave, but one of them suddenly asked him to stop and asked for compensation for giving him that information. Yeah, our boy had a hunch where this was going, but he still asked the man what he was trying to say. Yup, it was just as he had thought. The men brought out their blades, telling the kid to take off that bag. Apparently these people aren't any ordinary merchants. They are also part-time bandits who rob unsuspecting travelers such as our hero. As for their leader, he reminded the kid that no one would even know if anything were to happen to him in this wasteland, and suggested he hand over everything he had. After that, he told the kid to take off the bag and the cloak he was wearing, since he didn't want those things to get stained with his blood. Yeah, no, our hero just asked the fools what they will do if he refused. The man told the kid to stop acting like some powerful wizard and do as he was told while they were asking nicely. As soon as he said those words, a powerful gust of wind burst out, sweeping all of them off the ground. Our hero, though, was just thinking of these fools as training dummies to test the knowledge he got from Kieran, and the man was right. Using his powers this way used far less mana. As for the guys, they were still alive, so they started getting back up to see what happened. Our boy, though, wasn't done. Now it was time for some water bending. Using his powers, he turned that liquid into a piercing weapon. Well, not just one, but several. And his first target was that buck-toothed fool who was acting all high and mighty moments ago. Next panel, boom. Yup, this is officially in my top 10 favorite stories now. This kid isn't messing around. After dealing with that fool, he turned towards the main guy who started begging for our boy to spare his life. But in reality, he was just distracting the kid so his friends could catch him by surprise. Like a pathetic trick was going to work on him. He just raised his foot and kaboom! I don't think I need to say what happened to those fools after that. As for the last one, he watched the horrific scene before him in disbelief, unable to process what he was seeing. How could a young kid like this be so inhumane? But our hero was in no hurry to end the guy, so he decided to question him a little first. And his first question was why they attacked him without a plan. After all, he is a lone traveler, so there was a very high chance he could be a wizard who chose to travel alone. And the answer was a strange one. As the man told the kid, it was because he bowed his head when approaching them. To that, our hero thanked the guy since he taught him a valuable lesson today, and that brought a smile on the man's face as he asked if that means he could leave. Yeah, like that was going to happen, and he saw a water droplet hovering over his head. The story cuts back to the time when Kieran was teaching him important things before their journey, telling him he was going to meet all kinds of people, and how he can never show mercy to scum like bandits or the kind of people who don't hesitate to harm others to profit. And the reason he said that was because a life he spares out of pity could end up harming 10 good people. And man, I couldn't agree more with that line. Kieran is one wise man. After a while, Turan was seen following the road with the drag marks of the cart those merchants were pulling, but those clear wheel tracks cutting across the sand left one thought buried sharply into Turan's mind. He just took out some people without a single trace of remorse. Although he felt guilty, he also knew he had no other choice because it was just as Kieran said. People who could decide without hesitation to rob and kill for profit would target others at any given opportunity if spared. As those wheel tracks slowly faded away, Turan's chaotic heart gradually settled as he recalled Kieran's teachings, and then he finally arrived in a new world, and was left amazed at the view before him of the small city by the name of Muri. After a while, he was walking around the place, still amazed to see how many people had gathered around in one spot. Not to mention the architecture of this place was completely different from the village. But all that aside, he knew he couldn't let himself be distracted, so he walked up to a stall where he was greeted by the shopkeeper. But our hero shook his head. Since he wasn't a customer, he just had some questions. Flashback to that day, and there were some important things Kieran had taught the kid. One of them being the first thing he needed to do after reaching a new place was to find an inn. Back in the present, the man was already shooing him off, telling him to leave because he was blocking his customers. And that caught the kid by surprise, since moments ago this was the same guy who was greeting him with a smile. But it didn't take him long to understand what was going on, so he pointed at some apples and asked for their price, which was 2 ducat. That was the first time he was hearing of that currency, so the man told him to just pay with whatever coins he had. That was when our hero repeated his question once more and asked for an inn, and surprisingly, this time the man with a smiling face gave him the answer to that question. After a while, he arrived outside the establishment, and as soon as he entered, he came face to face with the inn staff named Lena. Finally, a female character and a beautiful one at that. And I think the kid might actually have a shot at her, since the first thing she said after seeing that pretty boy face of his was that they don't usually get handsome customers like him. But our hero quickly changed the topic and asked for the price for a night in this inn, which was 16 ducat, a little expensive, but our boy agreed to pay it anyway. While doing so, he told the woman he had a question, and when asked what, he asked if there were any monsters nearby with a bounty on them. But surprisingly, he noticed the woman just staring at him for some reason. So he asked if he said something he shouldn't have. No, that wasn't the problem. The problem was she never expected to see someone like him in her establishment. And no, it wasn't because he was looking around for monsters, but because he was naive enough to think information comes for free in this world. Well, anyway, after a while she was telling him about some city hall, but our hero had no clue what that was, which was also surprising since how can anyone not know about a city hall? So she ended up explaining that it was a place that handles various public affairs, and the officers who work there are employed by the city's lord. But she was sure that the place was probably closed down by now since the sun was about to set, so she suggested he check there first thing tomorrow to find any good-paying bounties. After she was done explaining, she asked the kid if he was a monster hunter, which was a new term to him, so he asked the woman what that was. Apparently, there had been a rumor going around this city that if a normal person hunts monsters, they can become a wizard, and the people who believe in this rumor are called monster hunters. But she, on the other hand, was sure all that was just superstition. Just then, a hand landed on our hero's shoulder, so he turned around and saw a man standing there who introduced himself as Midan, while telling the kid that was no superstition but a fact. As for the lady, she was surprised to see the guy still in one piece, since last she saw him, he was going to hunt for a monster. By then, our hero himself was getting curious about this rumor, so he asked the guy to tell him more about this whole humans becoming wizards thing. The man pointed out how wizards can grow their strength when they hunt monsters, so normal humans can apply the same principle if they manage to absorb the power of that monster. Well, at least that was their theory, which was why the 4 of them had been trying to hunt monsters so they could also become wizards. Our hero asked if anyone in their team was already a wizard, and the answer was a no, since this city only has the Lord's wizards who work under him. Changing the topic, he asked what a puny kid like him was doing looking for monsters with that worn-out gear and no proper equipment, and asked if he at least had something to defend himself with in case he came across a monster. Our boy brought out his sling, but that thing was all worn out. Although our hero agreed with the guy, he was still sure it was good for another couple of hunts, so he wasn't too worried about it. After hearing his words, the man told the kid they had been looking for another member in their party and offered to let him join them. No surprises there, the guys were a bunch of idiots, so he refused. A few minutes later, the kid was in his room, still trying to process the fact that he actually left the hill. On top of that, he couldn't wrap his head around what he did to those people in the desert, and he found himself wondering what could be waiting for him in the city. Just then, he heard knocking on the door, so he quickly got up and asked who it was. Back to the time he was getting ready to leave the village, Heir told him another important thing, which was to never let his guard down even at an inn. He explained to the kid that a city isn't automatically safe. There are always people around looking to take advantage of others. Back in the present, he was reaching for the door to unlock it, ready for anything, but as he opened the thing, he found Lena standing there with a smile on her face, which was surprising, so he asked the woman what was going on. Yeah, the answer was a strange one. It was cold outside, so she came to keep him warm. Yeah, no, our innocent little idiot had no clue what this weird woman was talking about, so she tried making things easier for him so his pea-sized brain could understand. But still no, the fool had no clue what this woman was trying to say. So she leaned in closer and whispered into his ear that for a small amount of money, she would do whatever he wanted. So our hero told the woman he didn't want anything from her. But the woman smirked and went with that old line. Don't lie, I can tell you want this just by looking at your face. Yeah, this face that had absolutely no reaction even after she tried giving him a peek under there. And that surprised the woman since if it were anyone else they would have cracked by now. But this kid was just standing there completely clueless. Cut to Charon's face, filled with a mix of horror, worry, and anger, as he told the kid never to do that, and yes, this was the most important advice he gave to the kid that day, which was to be careful around inmaids and prostitutes, because 98% of the time they are carrying transmitted diseases. Well, for them it was no big deal since their mage bodies are naturally resistant to most diseases, but the problem might arise if he finally finds his one true partner, because he could unknowingly transmit that disease to her. Cut back to the present, and the woman was seen angrily stomping her way down after being turned down by a virgin. As for our boy, he was still having a hard time understanding how city life works. First it was that fruit shop guy, and now even Lena. These people put a price on even the smallest bits of information and conversation. Just then he heard a familiar voice outside his room, and that caught his attention. Cut to outside, where the same men were seen talking about our hero and why their boss tried recruiting the kid, because to them that kid seemed way too cocky, and asked if he was planning on using him as monster bait. But surprisingly, they heard the guy telling his friends that the kid reminded him of himself at that age, so he was just worried about him. He figured keeping him close might stop him from ending up like him, or worse. Those words brought a smile to our hero's face, and he thought maybe this city wasn't all that cold-hearted after all. Fast forward to the next day, and he arrived at the building looking for work, and surprisingly, the guy on the front desk wasn't as friendly as Lena, but not like he was here to make friends, so he got straight to the point and told the man he was looking for monsters to kill. Flashback a couple of days to Kieran, who was telling the kid that the world won't always be kind to him out there, and when asked the reason, he told the kid people don't have a reason to be kind to anyone, so he told him a simple method of changing how people treat him out there. Reveal that he is a wizard, and ordinary people will bow their heads. Back in the present, and the man was handing him the picture of the monster they needed exterminated, but since our hero still hadn't revealed he is a wizard, the guy wasn't being too kind to him and told the kid to hand that thing back after looking, since he needed to deal with more idiots with a death wish after he was gone. Yeah, after dealing with those ferocious creatures back in his mountain, the kid was having a hard time believing this thing they were having trouble with was even a monster. As for the man, he told the kid it was highly unlikely, but if by some miracle he manages to take out that thing, he needed to bring its body back as proof for the reward, because they still need to have a wizard disperse its mana, otherwise it might turn into a wraith. Yeah, our hero knew that all too well. After all, he almost got Kieran killed because of that one mistake, so he wasn't planning on repeating it. Changing topics, he asked the man the reason for giving these tasks to civilians. After all, this is a knight's duty. The man answered knights weren't the kind of people with that kind of time in their hands, because their job is to maintain public order in the city. As for hunting monsters outside the city limits, that was where guys like him came in. Thugs who were meant to handle these smaller problems. After our hero was gone, the guy sighed in frustration, because he was sure the kid was going to get himself killed, just like the ones before him. Fast forward 30 minutes, and the body of a crow monster was seen lying on the ground, and around it, 3 stunned men staring at the thing in amazement. Because not only did this kid take out this creature extremely fast, he did it so cleanly as well, because this was the first time they were seeing one in such good condition. Our boy, though, couldn't care less about any of that, so he asked the man who was supposed to pay him the reward money. And the second man, realizing the kid was no joke, started running for the counter and asked him to stay there while he went to grab his reward. After calculating the reward and seeing that the creature he brought was in good condition, he even threw in a bonus for our hero. After a bit, while scanning the creature's body, that mustached man noticed something. Well, it was our hero, who still hadn't left yet for some reason. And when asked what was going on, they heard the kid ask for more bounties. The story fast forwards to a person presenting the finest delicacies of their establishment, and this person was Lena, who was impressed after hearing the news that the scrawny little kid managed to take down 30 monsters in just 3 days. And like any other greedy person in the city, she asked if he made a lot of money from all those bounties. Our boy answered saying that the money was never his main goal. His main goal has always been to absorb as much mana from the monsters as possible to grow his strength. Although he succeeded in that task and could feel his strength increase several folds since he left the mountain, there was something bugging him, and that was the fact that he could feel he hit his limit for some reason, and the only way he could think of breaking past it was to find stronger monsters. As for the two, they were amazed seeing how this scrawny-looking kid managed to devour all of that all on his own, especially Lena, as she wondered which part of his body was all that fat going to. Our boy just stood up, thanked the two for preparing such a delicious meal for him, and got ready to head back to his room to get some rest. But then out of nowhere, a hand appeared, grabbing the kid by his collar. Looking back, he found 2 thug-looking guys asking where he was going. Turns out they had been staring at him for a while now, and saw how he devoured all that food without even blinking. They weren't happy about it, and since it was clear the kid was stacked with cash, they tried extorting some of that for themselves. Not even letting him finish that line, the kid karate chopped the fool right in the middle of his face, and that scared his friend. But our hero told the two not to be scared. If they wanted some charity, they would first need to entertain him a little. That's when the second goon also joined in to get his ass handed to him. Our boy obliged and struck back with a punch to his face as well. Following that, the third guy rushed in with a stool in hand to smash it on the kid's head. Our hero just raised his hand and stopped the attack without any effort, while simultaneously lifting his hand toward the fool's head, and then, boom, He flicked his finger, and the man was sent flying straight back into the ground in Bollywood style. By then, the woman whose furniture these idiots were trying to wreck was at her limit, so she screamed at all of them to stop fighting inside her inn. The story cuts a couple more minutes, and Maiden was seen bowing his head, apologizing for what his men did, and in front of him was our hero, who had no idea how he was supposed to respond. Turns out they had been tight on money lately, so his men got jealous of our hero, because he came into the city a couple of days ago and already had everything going for him. Feeling bad for the guy, he asked how bad things were. The answer was, they don't even think they'll be able to pay the room fee anymore, but that was their problem. He just came here to apologize, but as he was about to leave, he saw the kid reaching out a pouch of coins. Surprised, the man asked the reason, and our hero just told the guy this was the repayment for the kindness he showed before, when he said he was worried about him and tried to bring him along. That obviously surprised the man, so he asked who told him that. Our hero changed topics and reminded the guy of one lesson he had to learn in this city, that there was no such thing as free money. So in return for this money, he wanted some information, and the man happily agreed to tell him anything he wanted to know. The story cuts to the next day, and our hero was getting ready to head out to the next city, but first he needed to hunt one last monster. Turns out last night paid off, since he managed to gather a lot of useful information from Maidan. Recalling the man's face and how he treated him, he couldn't help but think that despite not being as seasoned as Karan, the man seemed far purer and kinder for his age. Just then his nose caught something, so he immediately turned around and bolted in that direction. Arriving at the spot, he noticed massive claw marks on the trees around the area, but that wasn't the only thing strange he found there, because in front of him was a man's motionless body covered in red liquid. Upon looking closer, he realized it was one of Maidan's men. That was when he spotted another body to the side, and when he turned to see who it was, he saw that it was none other than Maiden himself. As he was trying to figure out what could have caused all this, he heard a faint sound from the back calling out to him. Looking back, he spotted a man on the brink of death, trying to warn him about something. Sure enough, as he looked at the location, he saw something staring at him, and that someone looked just like a rabbit that was munching on the lifeless bodies of all the men. Holy guacamole, what the actual fuck is this? This is no rabbit. That looks like Satan got drunk and said, let me try something new. Damn, that shit looks scary as fuck. Well, anyway, our boy wasn't really impressed after seeing the furry little creature standing before him. Yeah, it turns out he was wrong, because that thing was fast as lightning, and that scared the kid to his core, because if he was even a millisecond late, that creature would have chomped him in two. Realizing the creature was no joke, he brought out his sling and wasting no time threw a bunch of rocks the creature's way. But despite possessing insane speed, the creature didn't dodge. Instead, the tiny little bastard started using its ears to play baseball with the things being thrown at it. Seeing how easily the thing managed to stop his attacks, our hero decided to change his approach, since that thing clearly was good at defending against throwing weapon techniques. The creature, however, wasn't planning to give him that chance, so it leaped right back at the kid. But then, as it was still in the air, it noticed something strange, because somehow the kid that was standing before it suddenly vanished. So it immediately hit the brakes to see where he could have run to, but here's the thing, he never ran. He was standing right behind the monster, and just as he got the opportunity, he swung that thing and jabbed it straight into the creature's throat. Although the attack was effective, the creature still wasn't out of the game, so it swung its ears to attack back, but our boy managed to move out of the way in time, and using the chance, he used his bloodline ability once more to conceal his presence. In that very same split second, the bunny leaped at the kid, but by then he was already gone. By then, the monster had entered a frenzy state, so it started destroying everything around it to try and get to the kid. But no matter how much it rampaged, it wasn't able to find him anywhere, and then it happened. Suddenly, the whole forest fell silent, and after a few moments of stillness, the creature let out a loud, pained screech and plopped to the ground. Turns out this was our boy's plan all along. He knew he couldn't beat the thing in a frontal fight, so he injured it just enough with that attack so it would constantly lose blood, and the thing going berserk only sped up that process. And now that the thing was finally down, he prepared to absorb its mana to finish it off. And just like with the tiger, green mist started seeping into his body. But unlike that time, the amount of mana he was absorbing was different. It was far greater than the leopard, and all the smaller creatures he had taken out so far combined. As soon as he was done, he heard the same guy's voice from the side, showing disbelief that the kid was a wizard all along, and asked the reason for hiding his true identity from everyone. It was a long story, and knowing the man didn't have that kind of time, he changed topics and asked the guy if they have any family he could pass their belongings to, and the answer was a no. Cut back to last night, when Maiden was telling our hero about a library which he could find in a nearby city called Orem, which is said to contain thousands of books. But there was just one problem. Only wizards were allowed to enter into that place, but that was no problem for our hero. After a while, he was standing before the resting places of the men, paying his final respects and telling Maiden he was going to head to that great city he mentioned. After that, he turned around and started walking away, with one last wish, hoping that Maiden would finally find happiness wherever he was now. The story fast-forwards once more, and he was now seen standing in line waiting for his turn to enter the city. And to his surprise, unlike the last city he had been to, this place was even grander and more lively. On top of that, there was a huge line of people who were being inspected before being let into the place. That's when he noticed one of the guards staring at him for some reason, and sure enough, as soon as it was his turn, the man shouted for him to stop. And when asked the reason, he heard the guy telling him he couldn't enter. And the reason was his clothes and how dirty they were, so the guy told him to dust himself off first. With all that out of the way, he finally made his way to the library, which was basically a massive tower that looked like it could use some serious maintenance. As he was staring at the building, he caught the eye of some of the guards who were keeping watch outside the place, so he walked up to the men telling them his intentions. The men said the same thing, only wizards were allowed in there, so our boy told the two he was a wizard. Yeah, no. Seeing those worn-out clothes and all that dirt on him, with a nasty smell to go along with it, the man wasn't buying that for a second. So our hero asked the guy to test him. With no other choice, the guy raised his arm to sense if his body possessed mana. Yeah, turns out this kid standing before him was no ordinary wizard. He had something terrifying sleeping inside of him, and apparently the amount of mana that the kid's body was storing was just unreal, and the guy almost lost consciousness and fell to his butt. His friend immediately rushed over to check up on him and heard the guy pointing out that this man was no ordinary wizard, he was even higher than a noble class. Yup, the guy's attitude did a complete 180 when he heard those words, and he straightened up and introduced himself as a knight of House Valtus, and his name is Kenya, and asked for our boy's house. Our boy wasn't sure what to say to that, so he asked the guy if that information was necessary for him to enter, and the answer was a no. But there was one thing first, he needed permission from the Master of Vaults if he wished to enter the library. We are once more a couple of hours into the future, and the kid was seen sitting in a luxurious shower, and the reason he was being so uncomfortable was because whoever this Chad is who welcomed him into his home even gave him 3 of his maids who were scrubbing him all over to get that stench off his body. But since our hero wasn't used to this kind of attention, he asked the women to stop since he wished to wash his body himself. But that was a problem for the women, since if their master found out that they failed to properly attend to an esteemed guest, they would get punished. So in the end, our hero just sucked it up and allowed them to run their hands all over him. After they were done, the female was left in awe, but she quickly composed herself and apologized to the kid. Well, I wouldn't blame her. The guy was looking like a proper noble after changing into those fresh clothes. The women quickly apologized to the kid since they momentarily lost themselves because of his beauty. Our hero told the girls there was no need to apologize, which was also a problem for the women, since they weren't used to being talked to so politely by nobles, so they asked him not to speak to them so casually. That was when he heard another voice from the side calling for his attention. Turning around, he spotted a red-haired child walking into the room, who I think is a girl. I'm not sure though. Well anyway, she was showing surprise at how much he changed after switching from those beggar clothes. And from her tone, I think she might have taken a liking to him, meaning those maids aren't the only ones who fell for our hero. Ignoring that comment, our hero introduced himself, and so did the girl, and her name is Azella. Like everyone, the first question out of her mouth was which house he belongs to. Our boy told the girl he can't reveal that information for personal reasons. That piqued the girl's curiosity about him, and yeah, I was right. She did take a liking to the kid, and seeing how mysterious he was, she decided to play a little game with him to find out just who he really was. Next panel, and the whole room was shaking with mana shooting everywhere. Like our boy was going to back down from a challenge, so he returned the pressure, and both their mana began clashing against each other. As for the rest, the pressure being released was too much for them to handle, so her male servant stepped in to shield the women. And just as quickly, both of them stopped and the place went back silent once more. As for Azella, the girl was genuinely impressed after seeing what the kid was capable of, so much so that her hands were shivering with excitement. And realizing the kind of potential this kid was hiding inside him, she just had one more question to ask him, and that was if he would like to marry her. Yup, the floor dropped from under our boy's feet the moment those words hit his ears. On top of that, this was the first time they had ever met, and he didn't even know anything about her, so he didn't know how he was supposed to respond to that stupid question. Luckily, seeing him making that dumb face, the girl started chuckling, saying it was just a joke. But was it really? I mean, just look at that look she was giving our hero. She even told the kid to think about it because the seat next to her was still empty. And then she simply turned around and started walking out of the room. After he was alone, the kid turned to his own hand and noticed them trembling. Turns out that girl herself was no joke because she was at least equal to his level, if not stronger. After a while, he was standing before the big man himself, the Lord of Aurum, a man by the name of Rug Valtus. Unlike his daughter, he didn't seem too enthusiastic, so our hero introduced himself to his future father-in-law. The man was already informed of the reason for his visit, so he got straight to the point and told the kid that if he came here chasing rumors, then he was wasting his time, since that library didn't contain any amazing ancient magic or any secret method to increase mana. But since our hero wasn't after any of that, he told the man he wasn't here for that. To that, the man allowed him to use the library, but suggested our hero take some rest for the day, since he had a long journey to get to the city. The story cuts to the next day, and our hero was seen walking into the place, with the same two guards who were rude yesterday, now bowing their heads in respect. Entering the building, he was left stunned at the view, since the place was unlike anything he had seen in his entire life. Just then, he heard a voice from the side calling out to him, "Yeah, this artist is definitely a lolicon." Well, whatever, this right here is the librarian, who was assigned by the Lord to this place to explain the rules to him and help him around the place. That was cool and all, but our hero was more surprised by the fact that the librarian of this place was a little kid. The kid, however, started explaining the rules. The first one being, if he damages something, he has to pay for it. Second rule, he can't take the books out. And the third and most important rule, she will be following him around like a shadow and keeping an eye on his every move, and he doesn't get a say in the matter. After she was done making herself clear, our hero started making his way to grab some books and asked the girl if she could help him pick some. The girl didn't mind and asked what he was looking for. Some romance or history, or maybe, given how young he was, something a bit spicier. Yeah, our boy knew exactly what the girl was trying to say, so he brushed it off, saying he just needed something with basic common sense about the world and how it works. Next panel, boom, a whole pile of books was tossed onto the table, and these were the ones she chose for the kid to start with, because most of them contained the information he wanted to learn. Turns out this was the first time in his life he actually held a book in his hand, and it makes zero sense because how can he read and write if he never saw a book his whole life? Well, anyway, he was amazed to see the kind of knowledge these things held inside. So after that day, Turan repeated the same routine every day and visited the library to learn new things. And thanks to that, he came to understand the world's geography and the different races who live here much better. And turns out this world doesn't just have hideous monsters that are trying to turn humans into snacks. There are also other species like pixies and mermaids who would technically eat a man given the chance. But hey, not the worst way to go. Not just that, he also learned a lot of things about how various items are manufactured and processed. Even things about monsters and relics from the era of the Old Empire. With each piece of knowledge he gained, the world that once felt like an unknown space became clearer and more vivid to him. Cut back to Rugvaltus, who was asking the kid if he was enjoying his stay in the city and how his visits to the library are going. Our boy told the man everything he had learned and how he managed to improve himself thanks to the books he had been reading. Although the guy was happy he was making good use of it, he did make one thing clear. The reason he was allowed to use the library was an act of goodwill, and he expected to receive payment for that goodwill. Yeah, our hero learned that lesson a long time ago, so he asked what he wanted in return. Turns out a monster has appeared north of their city and has been attacking travelers. 4 of their knights who were sent to subjugate the creature never returned and were probably already turned into fertilizer. And with things getting so out of hand, they have no other choice but to mobilize nobles to deal with the matter personally, but their house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment, so he wanted him to tag along with those 2 and deal with the threat. Although he agreed, there was something bugging him, because last he heard, wizards weren't usually the type of people who got involved in things like this, or at least that's what that man told him. Rugvaltus explained that the road which was being blocked was an important trade route for Aurum, which had been closed off for 10 days, so they had no choice but to handle the matter quickly and get it resolved. Yeah, it turns out the reason he let him use the library so easily back then was because they had already been stuck dealing with this problem before he arrived, so he wanted to put him in their debt so he could be used when the time was right. The story cuts to the outside, and our hero, along with a small force of wizards, was seen walking out of the city. As for the 2 nobles that man was talking about, the first one was his own daughter, and the second a man with the face of a side character. As for Azella, the girl was feeling irritated about the fact that her father even mobilized a guest for a monster hunt, since she was sure they were more than enough to handle it. Our boy apologized and asked if he was that unreliable. The girl told him that wasn't the case. She was just saying her father was making a huge fuss over a simple matter. Her friend, however, advised she not call their lord fussy in front of the guests. Yeah, who asked him for anything, so she just gave him that glare to put him back in his place. Well, anyway, he turned to our hero and introduced himself as Marvin Voltus, another mage, and yada yada, the usual stuff no one cares about, since he's probably going to end up dead after a couple more panels. But the girl, on the other hand, wasn't in the mood for his nonsense, so she suggested they stop wasting time on the fool and find this thing, since she wanted to get some sleep afterward. Whoa, turns out this right here is Azella's younger brother. I thought the guy had a crush on her or something. Well, he was asking our hero if he has a thing for his older sister or anything like that, and our hero immediately told the man no, and for some reason the man told the kid he was relieved to hear that, which is pretty sus if you ask me. Just then they heard Azella's voice telling them to stop. Looking ahead, they saw a broken cart blocking their path. After a closer examination of the scene, they realized this was the work of that same monster, and since they had already blocked this path from their side, these people probably came from the south, just to end up as nourishment for the monster. Our boy was also scanning the area, and after looking around for a bit, he told the gang the creature who did this was a monkey. Yeah, that monkey part caught the girl's interest, so she asked how he could be so sure. So he pointed at a handprint on the wagon which resembled that of a man. And from what he could tell, he was sure the creature went into the forest after having his fill, so if they find the trail and pursue it, they should catch up to it before sundown. But the problem was none of them could use that kind of magic, which was a problem. Maybe for them, but not our hero. He had a nose like a hound, so he picked up a smelly-looking piece of cloth to get to it. The girl, however, was curious to know if that was his bloodline ability. Our hero answered no, this was just something he used a lot, so now it came naturally to him. Sure enough, just one whiff of that thing, and he immediately saw a trail leading into the forest. After a while, they came across a water source where the trail ended, meaning the creature washed itself before moving on. This was something new for Azella, since a beast cleaning his scent to avoid being tracked was something unheard of. But our hero knew there was more to this than it seemed. Sure enough, he picked up the same faint scent coming from the area, so he shouted for all of them to get on their guard because they fell into a trap. Oh god, that thing is no monkey. That's something straight out of Attack on Titan, and true to the lore, the thing was holding a bunch of rocks in its hands. Yeah, the soldiers realized what that thing was planning on doing, but it was already too late to find cover, and the thing managed to take out several of the guys with that one attack. Luckily, our hero managed to get out of the way, but then he turned to the girl and her brother and froze, because those damn siblings were using their own men as shields to save their own skins. And when their purpose was served, she tossed the guys to the side, and right there his mother's words rang into his mind once more, and he realized she was right about nobles. The girl, however, shouted for the remaining men to attack that thing. Following her command, all of them charged into their deaths. Surprisingly, the creature, instead of fighting back, started running in the opposite direction. Realizing they couldn't let it escape, both siblings gave chase. But the thing was just too fast, and they began losing it. Just then, something appeared next to the girl's face, and before she could process what it was, the projectile shot past her at Mach 7. And whatever that thing was, it was so powerful that it hit the creature's back and pierced through the other side without any effort. Surprised, all of them turned to see who it was and found our boy slowly walking up to them. And yeah, something definitely shifted inside of him after seeing with his own eyes how cruel these nobles truly were. Just then, their attention got drawn back towards the giant monkey monster, which was still alive and was writhing in pain, so to end its suffering, the girl raised her hand to finish him off, resulting in some fire centipede-looking creature manifesting around her arm. And no, it was a snake made out of fire, and the thing flew straight towards the giant baboon to swallow it whole. Next panel, bam! A massive explosion rocked that whole part of the battlefield, with the flames so intense that they literally blocked their vision. Well, apparently, what our boy witnessed just now was the bloodline ability of House Valtus. As for the rest of the survivors, they were just glad it was finally over, since they were sure they were going to end up as snacks for that monster as well. The girl herself was pretty impressed with how effective our boy's rock throwing was, since she claimed she got chills for a second as that thing flew past her face. And her brother, trying to poke fun at her, asked if she was saying she was scared, to which the girl fired back with a jab of her own, since he was the one screaming like a little girl. In the middle of their oblivious brother-sister bickering, they didn't even bother checking up on the other men who almost lost their lives at the hands of that monster. Luckily, there were no casualties. Even though that attack from the monster was strong thanks to their bodies overflowing with mana, they managed to survive. Which was a relief for our hero, but still, despite everything, he wasn't able to shake off that image of what these two did to their own men to save their own skins, since that was completely unnecessary. After all, the more mana a person's body possesses, the stronger it becomes, making these two several times tougher than the knights, but they still use those guys as their meat shields. Noticing him staring at them like that, Marvin asked the kid if everything was alright, and our boy, deciding to keep his distance from those two, chose not to get involved in the way they handled things in their own domain, and just answered it was nothing. And since it was getting late, the redhead suggested they start absorbing mana from that monster and get this over with quickly, because the sun was about to set. With that, all three of them gathered around the monster to begin the process. Apparently, our hero had been researching about mages and monsters in the library these past few days, and it turns out in this world, even if multiple people absorb mana from the same monster, the energy stored inside the corpse doesn't get weaker. But not like it mattered in this case, because not even halfway through and both siblings were already at their limit, so they stopped. That's when they noticed our hero, who was still going, which obviously surprised Redhead, and she was sure her father saw the potential of this boy, which is why he treated him so nicely. Plus, not only was the kid sharp, his spell proficiency and mana capacity are on a whole different level compared to a normal wizard. And despite seeing what that kid was capable of with her own eyes, she was still having a hard time believing this boy was a noble who hadn't even reached his growth limit yet. Fast forward, and the team was seen walking back to the city. Well, at least they weren't trying to hog all the credit for themselves, and admitted if it weren't for our hero today, they would have never taken down that beast, since he was the one who used his tracking ability to locate the monster's location and used his sling to knock the creature out, which gave them the opening to finish off the thing. But our hero brushed it off, saying it was a team effort. If anything, he blamed himself for not noticing that creature had set up an ambush for them. Turns out that monster also had a search ability like him, which it used to ambush them with those rocks, and surprisingly, neither of the two noticed it until now. So our hero decided to enlighten the two with some wisdom, and according to what he learned so far, the monster's external traits indicate their different abilities, just like the monkey they took out, which had massive hands and bigger eyes compared to a normal animal, which allowed it to throw things with great force while simultaneously giving it the ability to see much farther or even see through the forest, something it used to hunt for its prey. All that explanation surprised both of them since even they didn't know anything about that stuff, and asked how did he manage to figure out so much about that creature in such a short time. Our hero just answered saying he read through a monster encyclopedia at the library earlier. Well, turns out these guys are so busy loafing around that they never even bothered to step foot in that place. Well, Redhead did, but only once, which was ages ago. Back then she was curious, so she paid the tower a visit. But the books there were just too complicated for her tiny brain, so she left without even reading half a volume. And our innocent little hero just smiled at that and suggested next time she asked the librarian for some easier books that were easier to understand. Well, apparently that suggestion surprised the girl a little, so she asked what he was talking about, and here comes the shocker. Turns out they don't have any librarians working inside that tower. The story cuts a few minutes ahead, outside the massive structure, and inside, our hero was seen meeting up with the little girl who rushed over in excitement the moment she saw him walking in. Seeing her face, our boy couldn't help but let out a small chuckle, since he had been blind all this time and didn't even notice when this girl so casually called him by his real name, which itself screams suspicious, since in this city no one, no matter their status, would ever dare to call a noble by their name. And besides, her looks alone didn't exactly scream librarian. So to start things off, he asked the girl how did she knew what his name was, since as far as he could remember he never told her. That question somewhat surprised the girl at first, but then she also realized the kid caught on to her true identity, so she asked if he had finally realized she wasn't a normal girl. Yup, that answered our boy's suspicions about her. As for the girl, the way she found out his name was through the permit he was carrying with him, and no, she didn't take a peek when he wasn't looking. Apparently, anything, book or any document, as long as something like that is brought anywhere near the library's premises, the knowledge within it becomes visible to her. Acting like this was the most normal thing in the world, he asked the child how she wanted him to address her. Well, she didn't really mind whatever name he gives her since she doesn't have one, but still, she preferred something cute, like, let's say, my love. Yeah, no, our boy decided to just stick with librarian. The girl, however, was getting bolder by the minute as she told the kid not to get so polite with her after using her for so many days and calling her to do this and that, since that would just make things awkward. Our boy, realizing this girl was trouble, immediately took a few steps back while asking if she was a wizard from the old empire. The answer was no. To be more precise, she was never a person to begin with. She was more like a spirit, and this part is important here, since she was no ordinary spirit. According to the girl, there are two types of spirits in this world. The first kind is when a soul inhabits something living, it becomes a living spirit. But if it inhabits something neither alive nor dead, it takes the form of something like her. In other words, this library is her body, and everything he sees around him is actually her true form. As for the one he sees in front of him, it's just for comfortable communication. Basically, this form can change depending on a user's preferences, and for his preferences, I don't think I need to say anything more. Yeah, no, our hero immediately told the girl to stop making stuff up because there is no way in hell that's true. But according to the girl, that really was the case, since what he sees is like a reflection in water. Not sure why, but our boy began carefully examining the girl's body, and after staring at her stomach for a bit, he tried touching, and sure enough, his hand phased right through her, which naturally made the whole thing a whole lot awkward, since his hand going through her stomach was making her feel weird. He tried apologizing, but the damage had already been done since the girl was now annoyed as hell. Plus, this also reminded her she can't directly exert her power on an intruder, because if she could, she would have punished every last one of those bastards who carelessly took books out of her library. Curious, our hero asked if House Valtes knew about her existence, or at least if the head of that family knew she existed, since the redhead didn't know she was keeping a watch on this tower. Well, apparently he is the first person she met with who has the power and qualifications to perceive her, and the reason was her creator, who made her in a way so only those whose type is beyond a certain level could see her, which according to the clingy girl was pretty romantic. But our hero was more curious about this type she was talking about and what she meant by that. Turns out she was referring to his bloodline. Curious, he asked the girl if she could tell him more about his bloodline and how it works, but the girl refused, since that was his parents' job. But unfortunately, our boy is an orphan, so he can't exactly ask them about it. And since that was the case, she decided to help him out with this matter. But of course, he would need to give her consent before she thoroughly examines his body. Yeah, that look the girl was giving him was really starting to make him second-guess this whole thing, but it was already too late since the girl was now dead set on paying him back for moving his hand inside of her stomach just moments ago. So she struck and drove her arm into his stomach as well, and seeing her hand going through him scared our boy senseless. But then, almost immediately, he stopped, realizing what a big of an idiot he was being. As for the girl, she wasn't able to hold back her laughter. Ignoring that, she got to work and noticed his body contained a few small bits of several bloodlines, but there was a big chunk of the hunter's bloodline, which, just as Kieran had said, belonged to House Zahar. But then while looking around inside of him, she came across something unexpected. Apparently, our boy isn't a pure-blooded noble. He is a result of a union of two different powerful bloodlines, which obviously surprised him, so he asked the girl if she was sure, and the answer was a yes. So he asked about the second bloodline, but this time the child had no clue either, since it was still locked. But still, according to the child, this wasn't a rare occurrence for a person to be born with the union of two different bloodline combinations, so she suggested he give it time, because eventually that bloodline would unlock on its own when his body is strong enough. After hearing everything the girl had to say, Turin's suspicions about his mother turned out to be true. After all, she was far too polite and educated to be a commoner. That much even he could tell, meaning both his parents were descendants of noble families. And with this new information in hand, he thanked the girl for her time. But the girl wanted something in return. More specifically, she wanted him to spend another month in this city inside this library. After that day, the relationship between the two changed completely, and Turin no longer went on seeing the girl as just a librarian, and both of them got a whole lot closer after learning the truth about each other. And because of that, he learned the librarian even knew knowledge contained from the books that had been plundered from this place many years ago, knowledge that vanished over the past thousands of years. And having the laws of nature taught to him in plain words was a treasure beyond measure for Turin. He learned many things from the girl, knowledge about how all kinds of diseases arise through such small microorganisms, and that the decay of living things is caused by the feeding of such germs. Not only that, he grasped basic principles as well, like the refraction of light, the generation of heat through friction, and even the process of how living things get injured and how they heal. And after gaining all that knowledge, here he is, Turin getting ready to put some of that knowledge to the test. More specifically, he was testing the theory of decay of objects, and sure enough, it was just as the girl had said. That apple before him almost instantly rotted away the moment he used his powers on it. This was a level of magical control Turin never thought he would achieve, but thanks to her teachings, he was now able to do it effortlessly. Plus, he was sure something like this was possible using existing magic, but just understanding the principles behind it allowed him to use it using far less mana. Or to put it in simple words, simply changing the way he perceived the world raised his skill as a wizard. And the kid realized that the girl knowing this knowledge meant there was probably some powerful house out there that was monopolizing this knowledge and keeping it to themselves, since knowledge like this could easily shift the balance of power between families if this knowledge was made compulsory for every wizard. The girl also agreed, since that would also explain why the people's level of knowledge keeps dropping as time goes on. It was because this knowledge was kept hidden from normal wizards. Although Turin was thankful she taught him all these things, it was now time for him to leave this place and continue his journey to find answers about himself and his parents. Although the girl was a bit sad, she asked the reason. Well, apparently that Voltus guy has been openly giving him hints to leave this place, since he was of no use to them anymore, so he has no other choice. Out of nowhere, he suddenly got startled as the girl began throwing a tantrum, demanding that he take her with him, and then she completely face-planted after forgetting she couldn't touch the kid without his permission. Surprised, our hero reminded the girl she was just a manifestation of this library and asked if she could even leave this place. Well, the answer was a no, so he would just need to stay here with her, and she promised she was going to take good care of him. Yeah, no, our boy passed on that offer, and that hurt her a little, since he wasn't even trying to consider it. But still, she agreed he should go out and explore the world, since she wasn't the only being with such vast knowledge about this world. There were more spirits out there who might even know more than she does. Turin thanked the girl for everything she did for him and promised he would come visit her from time to time, and the girl, clearly trying to hide the fact she was sad, brushed him off and just told the kid she doesn't care. So with a smiling face, Turin assured the girl this wasn't goodbye, since there are still many books he hasn't read yet. Fast forward, and he was seen making his way out of the city, and thanks to the map he was fortunate enough to study, he knew exactly where he was heading next. His next destination was House Zahar in the Enril Desert, which was far to the east of Orem, and the reason he planned to head there next was because he was sure that place contained clues about his parents and what led his mother to choose to live the life of a normal shepherd in a small town far from everything. Cut a couple of hours, and Turin was making a small detour along the way. The reason he was not heading straight for that place was because he was in no rush. After all, if the clues he was searching for were going to disappear, they would have already vanished sometime over the last 18 years, and if they were still there, then going a little later wasn't going to make a difference. Plus, this side quest might actually pay off if he managed to get his hands on something useful, like he did in that library. Cut to the next day, and Turin suddenly heard some strange voices coming from somewhere not far from him. So he quietly sneaked his way closer to see what was going on, and found a horse that seemed to be getting ready to protect the man behind him from someone, and that someone was two individuals standing not far from the guy. As for the horse, this is no ordinary horse either, since Turan heard one of the men commenting how that pet monster was stronger than they had expected. Just then, he got a chance to take a closer look at the two individuals and saw they were not humans, but dark elves. As for the two men, they were just about ready to wrap things up, so they raised their hands, and our hero saw some kind of a sludge beginning to rise from the ground. And this here is the dark elves' necromancy, which Turan had read about in one of the books. But there was no time to waste. He knew he needed to do something. But the question was what, since there was a chance those elves were just trying to defend themselves from that man who could have attacked them first. But then he saw something that froze him for a whole second, as he spotted a human hand in the jaws of one of those elves. Turns out these two creatures are cannibals who hunt humans, which was reason enough for the kid to smash their heads in using his sling. But first he needed a plan, since he can't recklessly rush in without knowing how strong the enemy was. As for the two, they were casually devouring their lunch to replenish their strength. And is it just me, or is that skinny one a female? Man, I just noticed that chest. Next panel, boom, the male elf's head was seen bursting into chunks from a projectile that smashed straight through him. And this sudden strike stunned the female elf. As for the summons that man was controlling, all of them turned into dark liquid the moment his lifeless body fell to the ground. And this terrified the woman, since she realized she wasn't alone anymore. Thinking quickly, she called for her summons to shield her from any incoming attacks. In the middle of doing so, she failed to notice another rock was already flying her way. But lucky for her, her ram friend spotted the thing in time and managed to deflect it away using his horn. And since she now knew where the attacks were coming from, she ordered her bull to charge in and destroy everything. The creature complied and began smashing his way through all the trees that came in its path. But surprisingly, she didn't see anything hiding in that location, which only meant whoever this person is, he's using stealth to hide his presence, which is why she ordered her fox to sniff out that guy. The creature did as told and released some kind of magical wave all around them, and it worked, as she spotted an individual to the side. Yeah, this was definitely a problem for our hero since his trump card wasn't going to work anymore. As for the girl, she shouted for the two summons to take down that man. With no other choice, Turan got ready to confront the creatures head-on and summoned a powerful fireball in his hands, and just as the creatures got in range, bam, he released that fire towards the two. Although he managed to get the fox with that attack, the bull was far tougher, and it kept charging in at full force, forcing our hero to dodge its initial attack, and seeing how fast the creature was, he was glad he managed to take down one of them, since dealing with two simultaneously would have been a nightmare. That's when he felt something on his leg, and when turning around he saw the supposedly defeated fox monster right behind him, and the creature had managed to injure his leg, compromising his mobility. Reacting quickly, he kicked the thing off him before it could deal any more damage to his leg, and quickly turned to the bull, but by then it was already too late, since the creature was right next to his face, resulting in the thing crashing right into his stomach with full force, and he went flying back and crashed into a tree. And that hit proved deadly, since the kid immediately began coughing out blood. With him finally down, the two monsters started moving in to finish the job. As for the female elf, she was mocking the kid, commenting how she was going to enjoy herself devouring him alive. Next panel, boom, a hoof rammed her right on her face and she went down, followed by relentless kicks from the muscular beast that proceeded to crush her under its weight. Terrified, she shouted for her summons to forget about the kid and save her instead. The things complied and turned towards the horse instead, and easily managed to overpower the creature. By then, the woman was at her limit. Not only did this kid take out her partner, he even had the nerve to humiliate her in such a way, and she was ready to tear him apart. That was until she heard the sound of something flying at incredible speed through the grass, and that was the last thing she saw before meeting the same fate as her partner. With that, the forest fell completely silent, with only our hero standing as the last one left. As for the summons, they also began dissolving, signaling that the fight was now over. Although he managed to take down that thing, Turan himself sustained a lot of damage, and because of that, he fell to his knees, unable to even stand anymore, since that fight took a lot out of him. That was when he felt the breath of that horse gently blowing on his head. Looking up, he found the creature standing before him, who seemed concerned about his condition. So our hero thanked the creature for its assist, since if it were not for him stepping in when he did, things could have ended badly for him. The story cuts to the night, and a man was seen slowly opening his eyes, and the first thing he did after regaining consciousness was start screaming. But as he looked up, he found our hero sitting beside the fire. Seeing that it was a human, the man calmed himself and asked for the kid's identity. Our hero told the man the whole story, how he found him unconscious, saved him from those dark elves, and everything. In the middle of that, the man felt a nudge on his shoulder, so he turned and found his horse by the name of Tilly standing there. Seeing the two acting like friends, our hero commented on how that was a really smart horse, since not only was it trying to protect him when he was unconscious, it was even smart enough to sneak up on the enemy when their guard was down, which gave him the opportunity he needed to end that fight. With that out of the way, the man thanked the kid and introduced himself as Asas of House Berg. Our boy did the same, but he was curious to know what he was doing in this forest in the first place and if there was a reason those elves attacked him. Aziz answered there was no reason. He was simply on a pilgrimage with his friends when they were suddenly ambushed by those creatures. That's when Turan noticed tears in that man's eye as he recalled what he saw at that time and how savage those creatures were. But quickly getting a hold of himself, he apologized to our boy for losing control over his emotions. It's just that the people he lost during that fight were very precious to him. Turan asked if they were his family members. The answer was a no. Those people were the knights and servants who came on this pilgrimage with him, the people who practically raised him since he was a child. Hearing those words, Turan came to the conclusion this man wasn't like other nobles. He was genuinely a good person. But still, he knew they might not be out of the woods yet, so he asked how many of those elves he saw when they were attacked. Since he only managed to take down 2, well, that meant he got all of them because they were attacked by 2 elves alone. That was good, but just to double check, Turan activated his search ability and began scanning for any possible threats around the area but saw nothing, which was a good sign since they could spend the night at this spot to rest up. Out of nowhere, he saw the man bowing his head in gratitude and asked where he was headed and if he could accompany him to his home. Turan told the man he was also in the middle of a pilgrimage, which somewhat surprised the guy, since why would someone with such potential be risking his life traveling all alone, and asked which house he belongs to, but our hero refused to answer that question. Plus, according to our hero, he wasn't anything special, since the only reason he managed to take down those 2 elves was because he managed to ambush one of them, then barely fought off the other with the help of his horse. That's when out of nowhere both men begin releasing their mana to test one another's strength. And turns out the man before him was no joke either, and he was sure if he hadn't absorbed mana from those 2 elves he took down earlier, he wouldn't have been able to keep up with this man. Aziz himself was left shocked because just the raw mana being released by that kid's body was alone rivaling those 2 elves that ambushed him, which only means this boy is a noble born from a powerful bloodline, and the fact that he's on a pilgrimage means he hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. And then again, that same question resurfaced in his mind. Why would someone with such immense talent and potential be traveling all by himself? And since he wanted answers, he asked our hero if he would be interested in joining him on his way to House Berg, since he needed someone to escort him safely back home. Plus, he wanted to repay him for saving his life. Surprised, our hero asked how he was planning on repaying him. Well, turns out the nobles from House Berg are enchanters, and are an extremely prestigious house to the north, since their bloodline allows them to craft magical tools, and he was planning on making him the finest magical tool as a thank you. Cut to the next morning, and the men were seen standing before the tombstones of the people who lost their lives at the hands of those elves. While doing so, Aziz turned to our hero and thanked him, and when asked the reason, the man reminded him how he never mocked him for being a noble who cried at the sacrifices of his subordinates, since that was kind of pathetic of him. But our hero had no clue what he was talking about and asked why he would think that. Well, from what his father taught him, those who die in a righteous battle go to heaven, so there was no point in grieving for them. A true noble moves forward and honors their sacrifice. But to him, if not grieving over a family member's death is strength, then he was afraid he won't ever become truly strong. But our hero thought otherwise, since shedding tears for loved ones wasn't a sign of weakness but kindness. Before starting their journey, Aziz suggested they drop this formal talk and speak more comfortably, since they are practically the same age, and our hero didn't have any problem with that. So the kid extended his hand to seal their new friendship, and since this was our hero's first time someone actually calling him a friend, he paused for a moment but he wasn't saying no, so he shook his hand. After a while, both of them were seen stopping to get some rest. That's when Aziz showed our hero a strange-looking box. So of course, he asked what the thing was. Well, turns out it was a magical cooling box which uses magic to keep the temperature inside of the thing cold. But since our hero had no clue why would anyone need something like that, the kid explained to him how they can preserve items inside of that box for longer periods of time by keeping them cool. That wasn't the only thing Aziz was carrying with him. Apparently, he also had a teapot, I think. Not sure, along with a bunch of other stuff, the last one being some kind of an alarm that goes off if something comes within a certain range. Even his clothes were special, since these things had a self-cleaning function. Our boy was genuinely impressed with the stuff he just showed him, and he was sure just the clothes he was wearing were worth saving his life. But according to Aziz, that wasn't the case. His life was worth far more than just a piece of cloth, and he was planning on repaying him with something far better as soon as they reached House Berg. Plus, he's been really interested about the kid. Apparently, by now a lot of time had passed since both of them had been traveling together, and on their way they came across many kinds of dangers, and he's seen Turan use so many different kinds of magic that he lost count. And just for reference, a few of those were animal control, freezing, levitation, liquid manipulation, enhancement, luminescence, restraint, instant death, terrain transformation, lightning strike, and many more. After listing all of them, Aziz asked if our hero spent his entire life practicing magic for him to be so skilled in so many types, or perhaps it was a bloodline ability he didn't know of that lets him master any type of magic. Yeah, the kid had no clue how to tell him that everything he saw him do was stuff a talking library taught him. So he just ended up reminding the kid of their deal that they won't pry into which family he comes from. Aziz apologized and changed topics to his age since he was still curious how long it took him to learn all that stuff, and was left speechless when he heard the kid before him wasn't even 18 yet. And get ready for your jaw to drop as well, because the man before him is 43. Although it was surprising how powerful the kid was for his age, he commented something about not believing he would get to meet with another genius like him in a forest who was traveling all by himself. Surprised, the kid asked about the second genius. Well, apparently when it comes to magical control and the types of magic he can use, he is slightly superior to that person, but they do have an edge when it comes to an overpowered bloodline. Plus, it is a she he is talking about, who is around the same age as our boy and is his cousin. Hearing she was from the same family as Aziz, our hero asked if he could ask her to make him some magical tools, but the answer was a no. The reason being she's from the main house, and when asked what this main house was, Aziz informed the kid that the girl is actually one of the princesses of Arabian who might actually be in line to become the head of a great house one day. But the thing is, despite being born a princess, a person's position as the head was not guaranteed, since unlike ordinary wizard houses, the heads of great houses do not easily pass their positions to their own children. The reason being, a great house consists of dozens of relatives in the same generation, and naturally, at least one of them is stronger than the head's own child. But Mesa is a different story. Not only is she the direct descendant of the head, that girl was also born with the greatest talent of their house, so much so that after awakening her magic power, she mastered all manner of combat magic in just 10 short years, resulting in her receiving full support of her house. And now, at just 21, she's almost on the same level as the core members of the house. Not just that, but when their last eldest granduncle passed away, she was the one who devoured most of his magical power, but of course they received portions as well. Damn, I don't know how that works, but that kinda sounded messed up. Just then, he heard the kid pointing into the distance, telling our hero they were almost there. The moment our hero's eyes landed on the sight before him, his heart skipped a beat because before him lay one of the most incredible sights he had ever seen, something called the Dakane Plains, which is the central territory of Arabian, and right before it, the territory of House Bergzanilan. The story cuts to the inside, and a woman who I presume is Asi's mother was seen walking up to the main gate to welcome her son. And this 40-year-old man, the moment he saw the woman, ran in to give her a hug like a child, which obviously surprised our hero a little. That's when he saw the man's father also walking out, who was telling Aziz to address his mother as mother and not mom. After that drama, he quickly introduced our hero to the two as a friend he made during his travel who saved his life by risking his own. Surprised, his mother asked what happened, since this pilgrimage route was supposed to be safe. So Aziz told her the whole story of how they were attacked by dark elves on their way back home. The moment the woman heard those words, she completely lost it and got ready to bring down her whole house's wrath down on those elves for daring to target her child. But her husband instructed her to compose herself. After all, she was the head of this house. After calming the woman, he walked up to our hero and asked for his house. Same answer. He can't reveal that information. And when asked why, our hero finally decided to come clean and told the man he himself has no clue which house he belongs to, since he was born of a commoner mother and doesn't know who his father is. This revelation shocked Aziz, since he never mentioned anything like that while they were traveling. As for his mother, she was still grateful that he saved her son, and using her authority as the head of the house, she promised to reward him properly. But despite that, she refused to let him stay in their mansion. Instead, she promised to arrange him to stay at the finest inn in the city. Aziz obviously protested, since the least they could do is host him at their home. Although the woman agreed that was the proper thing to do. As things stand at the moment, they could not allow that, since they have an important guest staying with them. Which is why, regardless of the circumstances, it would be difficult to bring in a stranger of unknown origin into their home. Just then, they heard a voice from the back calling the woman her auntie. Turning around, they heard the female commenting how a person who saved Ishan won't suddenly try to assassinate her. Not far from them, our hero spotted a slender figure staring right at him. And this female right here is Masya, the same genius Aziz was telling him about not too long ago. But to our hero, she looked less like a princess of Arabian, and more like a walking corpse because of her current state. Turns out the girl has a bounty on her head and was nearly assassinated by assassins of Zahar House, which is why she came here in secrecy to hide for the time being. Aziz instantly caught on to what was going on, because an assassination attempt at the main house with all those fortifications only meant one thing, and the girl agreed it was indeed an inside job. After all, that main house doesn't just have one or two people with questionable loyalties. With that, she turned around and began walking away to get some rest. With the girl's permission, the woman instructed her maid by the name of Enna to prepare their second-best guest room for the child. The story cuts to the next morning, and Tehran was seen opening his eyes in the second-best guest room, which felt more like a top-class room than anything else. After getting dressed, he walked out and was seen staring at a lantern on the wall. That's when he heard someone call out his name. Turning around, he found Aziz, who was asking what he was doing all alone in the hallway. The kid pointed towards the lantern, since that thing looked pretty interesting. Yeah, but not for Aziz, since he usually makes those in his free time, and they weren't that of a big deal. And since the kid was so interested in the thing, he asked if he would like one for himself, but our hero passed. Just then, he heard thunder rumbling outside the window and got startled. Surprised, he quickly turned around to see what was going on, since there was not even a single sign of a cloud outside, so it made no sense. Well, apparently that's Mesa's doing. She was practicing magic. Seeing how powerful that magic was, he asked if that was perhaps the bloodline ability of the Arabian family, and the answer was a yes, that was something called the Storm bloodline. He even admitted he never hated his own bloodline, but still has always been a little envious of her power, since she was born with something he could never match. Turning to the kid, he asked if he would like to take a closer look, and our hero didn't have any objections to that, but he still asked if it was a good idea for a suspicious outsider like him to approach someone like a princess. But Aziz thought otherwise and was even willing to vouch for him. Plus, he was curious to know which one among the two was stronger. Apparently, he had been holding a grudge against that girl for quite some time now, and he wanted to see her frustrated face for once. Cut to the girl who was minding her own business when she suddenly heard Aziz's voice calling out to her. And since they never got a chance to properly introduce themselves yesterday, the girl asked for our hero's name, so he introduced himself. With that out of the way, she asked the reason for this sudden visit in the middle of her training. Hassad told the girl they just wanted to join her in practice, just like how they used to do in the past. Yeah, Mesa clearly remembered the last time they practiced, how he stormed off while crying after she learned a spell in 2 tries that took him a whole week. Yeah, our hero finally realized what grudge the man was talking about earlier. But Aziz wasn't happy about her bringing that embarrassing story in front of their guest, so he got straight to the point. Tehran is a magical talent that's second to none, which is why he brought him here as her challenger so both of them could duel it out to see which one of them was more talented. That actually piqued the girl's curiosity a little, and since she had no objections to that, she activated her power, and Tehran noticed the sky over his head beginning to darken, followed by a powerful golden thunderbolt falling towards the ground, and that thing landed right on the girl's body. That's when Tehran finally saw that girl's true form and the terrifying power that was hidden inside of that frail-looking body of hers, and apparently that sight was so terrifying that even the boy began to back away, as he realized the kind of monster that female truly was. And just as quickly, the sky began to clear away and everything quieted down once more. But Tehran was completely shaken after what he just witnessed, so much so that the kid was literally panting with sweat running down his whole body. Seeing his condition, the girl finally spoke up, and apparently Tehran didn't exactly appreciate what the girl had to say, since she mocked him right on his face saying he was no match for her. But thankfully, Aziz stepped in to calm the situation and commented that the girl was right. When it comes to raw magical power, the kid stood no chance, but that wasn't what was so amazing about this kid. The thing is his talent for learning magic, since he can pretty much copy any kind of spell in just one glance. And he was sure even she didn't come anywhere close to that level of talent. The girl didn't really appreciate the bragging, but still she wasn't backing down from a challenge and agreed to the challenge to shut him up for good. Our hero himself was itching to put her in her place, so he proposed each one of them demonstrate some unique magic known only to them, and whoever succeeds in learning it the fastest wins. The girl agreed to the challenge, but since Turan had no clue about his bloodline ability, she decided not to use her unique magic. After which, she tapped her foot on the floor to start the duel, resulting in a plant beginning to push its head from the ground. And before they knew it, a bunch more of those things shot out, and for some reason, all of them were going straight for Aziz. And with that, the man was seen suspended upside down in the air, with the girl asking our hero to give it a go. Plus, she wasn't planning on letting the loudmouth go until the kid copies the same spell she just showed him, since he had been getting on her nerves for quite some time. Yeah, our hero didn't really care what happened to the guy either, so he knelt to give it a go as well. Plus, this was his first time trying this kind of magic, so he wasn't sure it would work or not. So relying on the knowledge he managed to learn from the library, he ordered the seeds buried in the ground to grow. Just as he said that, the seeds began to sprout, and within seconds, multiple vines shot out of the ground. This actually surprised the girl since she somewhat understood what the kid did, but still, the speed at which he copied that spell was quite impressive, so she asked if he had seen anyone use that kind of magic before, since he figured out the magic's nature right away. But the answer was a no. And since, for the first time in his life, Aziz wasn't wrong about something, she decided to let him go. And now it was his turn to show her what he could do, so she asked him to go ahead. Our boy wasn't really sure what he was supposed to show her, since clearly using his bloodline magic meant suicide, given someone from that family tried executing her. That's when he got an idea, so he raised his hand towards some nearby bushes and made a gesture, and a rat was seen running out following his command. That somewhat disappointed the girl, since something like that was child's play for her. But our hero told her to cool her jets, since he wasn't done yet. After which, he began doing something to the rat, and the poor little thing began writhing in agony. And then poof, the thing went limp as its body began to decompose. That caught the girl by surprise since this was her first time seeing someone use that kind of magic. As for our hero, he showed her the thing, saying it was her turn next. Yeah, that was indeed interesting, so she got ready to give it a go as well. Same thing, she made a gesture towards the bushes, resulting in a rat running out towards her. She grabbed the thing, lifted it up, and began copying what the kid did moments ago. But for some reason, nothing happened. Turns out she had no clue what the kid did to his rat for it to start rotting away like that, because this is no simple magic. Asase himself wanted to know what kind of magic that was, since that was creepy as hell. Seeing how neither of them knew anything about the magic he used made our hero fall into thought, since these guys were supposed to be one of the most prestigious families, yet they don't possess this secret knowledge. In the middle of that, Asase spoke up, and since the girl still hadn't been able to copy the kid, he decided to declare him the winner. But no way Mesa was admitting defeat, so she asked him to shut up and amped up her magical output. Turns out she also understood causality, and everything Chiron taught our boy how magic works better when you understand what you are trying to do. First, you need to know if what you're doing is something that can naturally happen or not. Second, you need to clearly understand what is causing that effect. And third, you need to use the right amount of mana for it. Out of all of these, understanding the cause is the most important part. It decides both how likely your magic is to work and how much mana it will cost. If you don't understand it properly, there is still a way to make it work. You can just pour in a huge amount of mana and force it to happen, but that wastes a lot of energy. And then it finally happened. The thing began screaming as her magic began eating away at its flesh. As for the men, both of them were impressed she managed to pull it off. But still, for some reason, the girl looked in terrible shape after exerting most of her mana on just that one spell. And because of that, everything began going hazy for her and she fell to the ground completely out cold. This scared Asase, so he rushed over to check up on the girl. But no matter how much he screamed, the girl wasn't responding. Our boy himself was examining the girl's body in confusion, since she shouldn't have collapsed like that just because she exerted too much of her mana. Plus, even her strength to reinforce her body was completely gone for some reason, which was strange. That's when a thought hit him and he wondered if that could be the case. But since there was no time to lose, he asked Asase if they have any healers around here, but the answer was a no, so he suggested he prepare water and salt and bring it to her room and inform the adults of what transpired here. Fast forward a couple of hours and the girl was seen slowly opening her eyes, and the first thing she saw was the worried face of Asase's mother, who was relieved seeing that she was finally opening her eyes. Getting up, she asked what happened and where she was. The woman told her the whole thing, how she collapsed during training with their guest. To that, the girl fell silent as she slowly began to recall the events that transpired at that time. But the woman was still worried, so she asked if that man did anything to her because for now he was being kept in the temple under observation until this whole mess is resolved. The girl clarified none of this was his fault, it was her own mistake, and asked them to leave for now since her head was pounding from hearing so many questions. The woman apologized and told the girl about the soup she brought her. Well, apparently the reason this girl looks like Morticia Adams is because she hasn't been eating lately, which has something to do with her magic. But still, she suggested the girl take better care of her health. But since the girl refused to even answer her anymore, the woman got ready to leave. As for Mesa, she knew she was just worried about her, so she thanked the woman for everything. After she was alone, she turned to the soup and realizing the woman was right, she decided to force herself to eat to recover some of her strength. But then, as she took one tiny sip of it, something began to happen, as her whole body began shivering in terror, followed by an image of two individuals who were begging her to save them. And that vision terrified her so much that she tossed the plate to the side and began shivering as those memories began to resurface in her mind. The story cuts to the underground chamber where our hero was seen staring at some statue of a woman, and right beside him, a man who was instructed to keep watch on him, who was telling the kid not to even think about trying to escape from this place, since the doors and walls of this place are all solidified using magic. As for his name, this one is Haram Berg. Our hero, who had no such intentions, assured the man he completely understands, but for some reason the man kept going, and commented they are extremely firm, and then again he got right next to his face, and repeated the same thing. And that obviously scared the kid a little, since he wasn't sure if that man was threatening him or just boasting about this place. But then, just as quickly, the guy turned around and began swinging his sword. Obviously, the kid asked what he was doing, and the man answered he was training, and surprisingly, the man wasn't half bad. His swings were clean and efficient, with no unnecessary movements. Every motion had minimal preparation needed for the next strike. Noticing him staring, the man stopped and turned to the kid, so he apologized for interrupting him in the middle of his training. But then again, the guy got super close to his face with a new question. What did he think about his movements? Although the kid didn't know how to respond to that question, he just told the guy they seemed cool. That answer sufficed. So he got back to his sword swinging while telling the kid how most nobles dismiss weapon arts and rely solely on long-range attacks using magic. But he, on the other hand, thinks otherwise, since a strong body is essential for combat. Our hero reminded the guy how it was more efficient to focus on magical training unless one's bloodline specializes in strength. But then again, after the kind of experiences he's been through, he agreed with the man, since in real combat, situations arise when one can't only rely on magic to face their enemy. To that, the man out of nowhere extended his blade towards the kid for him to give it a try. Surprised, he reminded the guy he was supposed to be a suspicious person, and handing a weapon to someone like that did not seem like a good idea. But the man assured the kid even with that weapon, he won't be able to do anything. After all, what makes it a sword is the body of the wielder, and with his current weak body, he won't even be able to make a scratch on him. Yeah, the kid knew the guy wasn't wrong, so he took the blade. After which he got into his stance and began pouring his mana into the blade like any normal mage would do to give themselves an edge. But for some reason the man didn't like that, so he shouted for him not to do that. I bet the kid was a bit scared after getting screamed at like that out of nowhere, so he stopped and decided to just do as the man was saying. So it began. The guy started circling around him, fixing his stance and explaining to him how to maximize his defense using his sword from any incoming attacks. By then, the kid was beginning to second-guess this whole thing, but he had already taken the sword, so there was no going back for him anymore. And since that was the case, the only thing to do to not get yelled at was to do everything he could to not make the guy mad and follow his instructions carefully. As for the guy himself, he was not expecting this scrawny kid's body to hold this much talent for swordsmanship. So he began explaining to him why physical training is crucial for a wizard. It's simply because they rely too much on mana to enhance their physical abilities, and because of that, their body never reaches its full potential. In the middle of all that, Turan heard the door to the place opening, so he turned around and found Asiz's mother walking in. And the reason she personally came to fetch him was because she wanted to apologize for doing something unforgivable to him. But our hero told the woman there was no need to apologize, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that the young lady is unharmed. Plus, he should be the one apologizing since as a guest, the way he acted earlier was not appropriate. That's when he heard the woman informing him that Mesa wanted to apologize to him personally and asked if he had a moment to spare. Cut to the girl who was apologizing to the kid that he had been trapped in that temple because of her. But then again, our hero didn't mind, since at that moment doing that was necessary given someone was already trying to assassinate her. Plus, he was just glad she wasn't seriously hurt. The girl changed topics to that incident and what that magic was that he used on that rat, and if by any chance he lied to her and used some undisclosed bloodline magic during their duel, since the mana consumption to pull it off was absurd. Turan assured the girl that wasn't the case and was sure anyone could pull it off if they knew the principle behind that magic. But then again, the girl knew he won't reveal that secret, which was a problem, since that way they won't have proof that what he was saying was true and what he demonstrated wasn't some bloodline magic. Yeah, our hero just told the woman not to take that duel too seriously, since he really didn't care who won. But the problem was she is a sore loser who refused to accept that she lost, since that would be a stain on her reputation. So she proposed that both of them share one secret magic with each other. He teaches her that rot magic and she would teach him one of her family's secret spells. Knowing the girl won't drop this topic until she gets what she wants, our hero reluctantly agreed. After a bit, they were inside of her room, with our boy teaching her the lost principles of magic taught to him by the little librarian. And surprisingly, as soon as she grasped the causality and functioning of that spell, she easily managed to pull it off. And since that was the case, she reluctantly accepted her defeat and declared the kid the winner of their match. But still, she asked our hero if he could keep this a secret from Aziz and tell him their match ended in a draw, because she didn't want to see that guy getting cocky about winning. And our boy had no objections to that. With that out of the way, it was now her turn to teach him something, and whatever she had in mind involved a comb. And to our boy's surprise, the girl began brushing her hair. So apparently, she was trying to teach him the principle of static electricity, which involves rubbing two objects together. Yeah, no, our hero already knew everything about that stuff, and that surprised the girl, since this knowledge was supposed to be a secret. And now she had no clue what she was supposed to do, since she had nothing else to teach him other than that, so she asked him to give her some time to think of something to repay him accordingly. And once again, our hero didn't mind, and since both of them were on board with the idea, she suggested that until she could repay him for that knowledge, both of them trained together, but also made it clear it was just to repay her debt to him and not because she particularly needed him. Yeah, she definitely needs him, but our hero agreed to that and suggested they start their training tomorrow and meet in the garden in the evening. The story fast forwards once more, and all of them were seen sitting on the dinner table, and this was somewhat surprising for Aziz, since foods like this he never even seen on his birthday, let alone to welcome a guest, and heard his mother telling him to keep his mouth shut. Yeah, our hero himself noticed something off, since for some reason this woman was trying way too hard to win him over. Ever since that incident with Mesa, that was when he heard her calling for his attention, and it was about that reward her son promised him for saving his life. And since this was the perfect time, as the whole Hausberg had gathered, she asked if he had anything specific in mind he would like to request. The answer was yes, since he had been looking for something that could aid him in defense. See, Turan is mostly traveling all by himself, so he is always at risk of ambushes, so he wanted something that could protect him from surprise attacks. That was no problem for the woman, since she had already created similar items in the past, but the thing was, they don't have anything ready immediately. To that, IC spoke up, offering to personally fashion him something, but the answer was a no, since she doesn't want to drag their house's honor through the mud by giving the boys something not up to their standard. Just then, another man sitting on the table spoke up, offering to take on the task of making something. Surprisingly, this time she had no objections, but she was still curious to know what he had in mind. The person told the woman he was thinking of creating something that someone can carry with them easily at all times, so he was thinking of something like jewelry or a ring, with the function that draws out a guardian bloodline's defensive power. And when asked how long it would take him to create that item, the man answered 1 month. Turns out this kid is Aziz's brother by the name of Mello, who unlike Aziz is an exceptionally skilled wizard who creates such powerful items for their main house. As for his talent, he was on par with the woman herself, so receiving an item from him is like receiving something made by the head wizard of House Berg. Although our hero was grateful, he was still curious to know why she was going so far to reward him. But according to the woman, that was not the case at all. After all, he saved the life of her son, so this was the least she could do to repay him. And since it was settled, she allowed her hero to stay in their manor for 1 more month as their guest. Next day, and both of them were seen walking through the city, with Aziz commenting how his mother seemed to have taken a liking to him, and the reason was his talent for magic, which doesn't fall behind Mesa herself. Yeah, that explained to our hero why she was being so generous and trying so hard to keep him from leaving. So he asked Aziz if by any chance she was planning on recruiting him into their family. The answer was yes, and according to him, this was all her strategy, which she uses to scout for talented individuals. First, she gives them generous support, then puts them in her debt, after which comes the third step of introducing them to a pretty young lady to tempt them into marrying into the family. In fact, he wasn't her first target. Many adults in their house joined in that same way. Yup, it was official now. That woman is scary as hell, but Aziz assured the kid not to worry too much since she can't force him into doing anything against his will. As for the magical tool, it was already promised to him, so there was no catch there. Changing topics, he asked if he has any plans for the day. Our hero told him about his promise with Mesa, that he was going to train with her in the evening. Yup, that was perfect, since there was still quite a bit of time before evening, so he suggested both of them head out to have some fun in the meantime. But seeing him make that face, he asked if he was really planning on just sitting in a corner of the castle to train magic on a beautiful day like this. As a matter of fact, he was. But yeah, no. Aziz wasn't taking no for an answer, so he began dragging him to some place where they could let loose and have fun. After a while, they were standing in a casino. Yeah, no way our boy has the kind of money to blow on something like this, so he straight up told the man he was not interested. No worries, there were still a whole lot more fun things to do in the city, and while walking around with the idiot, something caught our boy's eyes, and it was a picture of a person, and not any ordinary person. That's none other than Kiorn. Cut to another place, and 2 swords were seen clashing against each other. Turns out it was some kind of a play about a great warrior by the name of Kiorn, who fought off the bad guys and saved everyone after a hard-fought battle. The contents of that whole story wasn't shown, but Aziz was pretty happy with what he just saw. Same couldn't be said about our hero, since whatever was shown in that play described Kiorn as an extremely powerful and kind-hearted wizard, and that left just one thought in our boy's head: that man's humility is unmatched. Which is why he was hoping to meet him one day, once again, to confirm this story that was being told about him with his own ears. Cut back to House Berg, where the sun was seen rising, and on the bed was our hero opening his eyes to a completely unexpected sight, and it was Haram, who for some reason had been staring at him while he was asleep. Before the kid could ask what this was about, he heard the man asking if he got a good night's rest. Not sure how to respond, the kid just answered yes. Getting up, he asked the reason for this sudden visit. Well, turns out our boy left a lasting impression on the man yesterday during their 5-minute training session, which is why he came here to fetch him so they could start with his training. But still, he asked if he had any objections to that. This was a rare opportunity for our hero to learn something new, so no way he was saying no. Just then, they saw Aziz walking in as well, who was planning on taking our hero to another one of those plays, but froze when he spotted his uncle staring at him for some reason. Well, turns out they could use another training partner, so he was planning on taking Aziz to the training grounds as well. Yeah, no, the kid, knowing the kind of training that man was talking about, simply turned around and bolted from the place, which somewhat surprised our hero since the man was just inviting him to train. How bad could that be? Yeah, after a bit, he was seen regretting his decision of agreeing with this training because this man is just insane. On the very first day, he was forcing the kid to do push-ups with a massive weight on his back, but at least thanks to his encouraging words or whatever he was yelling, he managed to somehow power through the torture, and bam, plopped right on the ground since his whole body was screaming in excruciating pain. Seeing him acting like that, the guy asked if he was tired, and obviously the answer was a yes, and the amused man explained to the kid why this much was necessary. It was because compared to a normal human, his body was several times tougher. Plus, he told the kid a really interesting fact about wizards. So to put it in easy words, he told the kid their bodies were different from a normal human in several ways. One being the training he went through right now won't go to waste no matter how much time passes. And to prove it, he reminded the kid how a normal human, once they stop working out, their body begins to lose muscle, and they lose their strength. But that wasn't the case for them. Wizards have mana circulating through them constantly, maintaining their bodies, keeping it in optimal condition, meaning the muscle he builds won't fade even if he stops training. And with that explanation out of the way, it was time to move to the next exercise. Yeah, no, he didn't even get to rest for 1 minute, and this man was already telling him to get back up. But the guy thought otherwise. After all, they are mages, meaning their bodies recover much faster, so it was time to move to weaponry and combat training. With that, time continued with the same routine, waking up early to head to the gravity chamber to train tirelessly with Haram to sharpen his reflexes and endurance. In the evening, he would meet up with Meza for magical practice and learn new kinds of spells. And before Turan knew it, 3 weeks had passed. And on this day, in some part of the castle, a powerful electric bolt was seen hitting a wall, and the one responsible for casting that spell was our hero, who had been trying to do some target practice but no luck. This somewhat surprised Mesa as well, but judging by that grin on her face, it was clear she was enjoying herself seeing him struggle with something for once. Plus, she never had that kind of problem, since her spells almost never missed their target, so she didn't know how she was supposed to help. Just then, she heard a person's voice calling her name. Turning around, both of them saw a new face walking in with some urgent news for the girl. That's when his eyes landed on our hero, and that somewhat surprised him for some reason. But before he could say anything, Mesa stepped up and asked what this was about, since she clearly told the main house not to let anyone approach her while she was recovering her strength in this place. Apparently, their patriarch had summoned her, which was strange, but she did warn the man this better be important, otherwise he should prepare himself for punishment. Oh yeah, it was important, all right. A whole legion of dark elves had been rampaging in the south of their territory, with 3 villages already being completely decimated by their forces. Plus, they got news from a source claiming their main target might be their house. That was indeed troubling news, so the girl agreed to head back as soon as she was done with the task she needed to finish. After they were alone again, she apologized to our hero, since she needed to head out now. But she never forgot about their deal and was still planning on repaying him for teaching her that creepy corruption magic. And after taking a moment to think, she finally thought of something, but she didn't seem happy about it. But then again, a deal is a deal. So she turned to our hero and asked if he was aware that a human body has electricity flowing through it 24/7. Well, it turns out no, this was the first time he was hearing of something like that. Well, that was perfect because she was about to enlighten him with a new kind of knowledge, which is also an Arabian secret teaching. But before that, she asked our hero if that would be enough to repay her debt, and the answer was yes. So she started off by telling him about the electric signals that are sent to the brain when a person sees or feels something. So she basically explained it to him in simple terms, how whatever he sees with his eyes or smells with his nose are just electric signals, which the brain is designed to understand. Not just that, the brain uses those same electrical signals to control a human body. So basically everything he sees and feels is just electricity flowing through his body to his brain. Well, it turns out our hero had no clue about anything he was hearing, since knowledge of this kind wasn't available in that library. Plus, he wasn't even sure how he was supposed to use this knowledge to his advantage. That's when he heard the girl asking what would happen to a human body if those signals are accelerated using magic. Yeah, our hero immediately caught on to what she was trying to say. Using this technique, a person could increase the speed at which they perceive and react several folds. Yep, that was exactly it. And she was impressed he caught on so fast. But she was curious how fast he would be able to learn this technique, so she asked the kid to give it a go. Our boy obeyed, closed his eyes, and began concentrating. And before long, he could feel those electrical waves flowing through his body. And with that first step done, he got ready to accelerate the rate at which that electricity was flowing through him. Just as he did that, his body began to react strangely, followed by his senses being enhanced several folds, and then he finally saw it. The world looked completely different from what he was used to seeing. Not just that, but it was like everything was moving in slow motion. And that brought a smile to his face, since it meant he succeeded. But then almost immediately, he felt a sharp pain shooting through his brain, and he began panicking as his sensory systems slowly returned back to normal. Well, that confirmed it for the girl. He succeeded. As for that pain, that's just the side effect of using a large amount of mana recklessly. But she assured the kid he would get a hang of it soon, and when that happens, he would be able to maintain that state for longer periods of time. Our hero didn't know how he was supposed to thank the girl, since what she just taught him was far too much compared to what he gave her. With that, the girl leaped into the air, and just before leaving, she assured the kid this was just an investment she made, since he seemed to have some talent, unlike most people she had seen. And the last thing she said was a promise. If he ever learned stronger magic in the future, she would come back to take everything he owed her. Fast forward to the next day, and an army of wizards was seen gathered in front of the main gate of the city. And this is the force that is to set out and exterminate those dark elves who had been terrorizing their lands. In the crowd was our boy, along with some other members of House Berg. Just then, Asa spotted Maya's making her way towards the main gate as well. So like the idiot he was, he began making things awkward for her by waving his hand like a child while screaming her name. Thankfully, the old man beside him stopped him before he made things any more awkward for the girl. Just then, they heard the announcement that the head of the house was arriving to lead the gathering. Following that command, all the men gathered straightened up to greet the person, and when he stepped out, our hero saw an aged old man who seemed to have seen better days but still looked cool as hell. As he made his way through his men, a man by the name of Battle Arabian, our hero asked the obvious question from Asses. What was up with that guy, and why did he look like he could collapse at any moment? Asses himself wasn't too sure, but according to the rumors he heard long ago, that man fought with the head of the Zohar house and during their battle suffered grave injuries. But that happened a long time ago, so probably he was just getting old. That's when the man lifted his hand towards the sky to shut all their mouths, and with just a single gesture, everyone gathered in the place witnessed the power of the Arabians, as the whole sky above their heads began to darken, followed by a deep fractured voice, heavy with age, that cracked through the air as the man called out to his men, urging them to advance with confidence and reminding them he was right there beside them. As soon as he said those words, dark clouds began gathering all around the place, with thunder rumbling all around them, scaring all the people standing nearby. And witnessing the power of the Arabian, all of them began cheering for the army, knowing that with this man on their side, they would eradicate those invaders and bring peace to their lands. Our boy himself was staring at the whole scene in awe, since even watching Mesa use that same spell countless times, he couldn't believe how powerful this man truly was. Plus, even with a body in such poor condition, this man was at the pinnacle of magic, with the power to command the very sky. And no, he wasn't intimidated, because that power right there is his main goal, and he was sure someday he too would reach that level. Fast forward, and a man was seen handing out some kind of a bracelet to someone. Turns out this was the magic item which was promised to our hero. As for what it does, this thing had the ability to increase his physical durability slightly even when he's just carrying it on his body, but when he channels his mana through it, that's when the real magic happens because that buff goes through the roof. But he did warn our hero of the backlash, since that thing drains mana like crazy, so he advised him not to rely too much on it and only use it when he finds himself in a pinch. Our hero thanked the man, since this thing was even better than he had imagined. The man agreed, since an item of this caliber is rare even among great houses. Just then, he heard the woman's voice calling for his attention, and it was just as he had thought. She invited him to join their family and offered to give him the hand of a beauty in marriage if he agreed. Tempting offer. Really? But with a heavy heart, our hero politely declined, since he was not even 18 yet, so baby making was out of the question. But more importantly, his journey still was not over yet, so he couldn't think about settling down until he finds what he was looking for. Yeah, the woman knew that would be his answer, since Aziz had already told her he has goals which cannot be achieved in one place, so she apologized for having to ask again. Turan thanked the woman for everything she had done for him and promised Asaiz and the Berg family would be his friends forever. With that, our hero was seen walking out of the main workshop. That's when he saw Aziz and Haram waiting for him outside. Just as he was about to ask what this was about, the man tossed a dagger his way. Apparently, this was a gift for the kid, which is a magical item with enhanced durability and sharpness. Our hero was grateful for this gift, so he bowed in front of the man to thank him while acknowledging the man as his teacher. And that brought a smile on the man's face, but deciding not to show how happy he was hearing him call him teacher, he quickly turned around and with that stiff body of his began walking away. That's when Aziz threw a cloak over the kid's shoulders. Surprised, he asked what this thing was. Well, turns out that wasn't the only thing he brought for the kid. He even made these special clothes for him, which were just like the ones he was using, that have the ability to clean themselves while also capable of repairing slight tears on their own. With everything this family had done for him and how generous everyone was, Turan could only thank the man, but Aziz played it off like it was no big deal. After all, they were friends, not only because he saved his life, but because after spending time with him and seeing how talented and diligent he was, he himself felt like he needed to change, and he was grateful for that. Still, he was curious about his next destination, so he asked where he was planning on heading. Our hero answered east. Turns out he had been to that part of the land as well, to a place called Carmine, so he suggested he avoid using a ship, since the waves there are just terrible. Yeah, our hero was aware of that because beyond those waves lies Zahar's land, also known as the Emerald Desert, but he decided not to tell him that because of obvious reasons. After a while, he was seen walking through the Dakane Plains, and despite being alone again, he was pretty confident this time, thanks to all this gear, and since time was of the essence, he decided to hurry forward. And boom, he bolted from the place, literally disappearing from the spot he was standing just moments ago. As for the people nearby, by the time they turned toward the source of the sound, the kid had already covered a great distance. With that, he kept running non-stop, and before he knew it, it was the next day. That's when he finally stopped near a small village, and no, it wasn't because he was tired or anything, but because his nose caught the scent of something strange coming from nearby. At first, he thought it was just the smell of a campfire, but quickly realized the smell was far too repulsive, as if someone had been burning an animal without skinning it, so he slowly began following the trail to see where it might lead him. And then he froze at the sight before him, because on the other side of that forest was a village that had been completely devastated by someone. As for that strange smell of something burning, yeah, you can see for yourself where it was coming from. His first thought was those elves, but no way they could have made it this far into the country with so many wizards around, so his second guess was bandits. Just then he smelled another scent coming not far from him, so he turned towards a destroyed house. Arriving inside, he found the place to be completely empty, but his nose said otherwise. Whatever it was definitely under that trapdoor in the floor. So to check, he grabbed the thing, and with one forceful tug, he pulled both doors from their hinges. As for where that smell was coming from, it was something he wasn't expecting to see in this destroyed village. Because hiding inside that basement was a child, and the moment she realized she got discovered, she began screaming in terror, fearing the same fate as the people outside. But our hero asked the child to calm down, assuring her he wasn't an enemy. And the innocent little thing actually believed him immediately. So, using the chance, Turan tried asking the girl what happened here and if she saw something when all that chaos was unfolding, and surprisingly, he heard the child saying something about a wizard who was responsible for this destruction. But before he could ask her any more details, the child suddenly collapsed on the ground. Well, thankfully, she was just tired from being locked in this place for too long, so she just lost consciousness, and since that was the case, he decided to take her to some safer place to figure out what was going on. Just as he stepped out of the house, he heard a voice shouting for him to stop. Turning around, he found himself surrounded from all sides by a bunch of individuals with weapons, and the woman with the bow and arrow demanded he drop the child and kneel, and the reason was because they mistook him for being the one who caused all this destruction and death to this whole village. Next chapter, and the woman was asking the reason for all this massacre, and if he wasn't even satisfied with this much, that he was now kidnapping a child. Just then, her friend beside her suddenly began panicking and ended up summoning a fire spear. Our hero tried explaining to the stupid people this was all a misunderstanding, but not even letting him finish. The panicking guys suddenly launched that fire attack towards our boy, resulting in the thing landing dead on our boy's body. This stupid move even made the woman furious, since that man was carrying a child. But then she saw something that had her terrified, as she spotted a hand appearing from within that smoke, and as it cleared, they found our hero standing there with not even a single scratch on his body. And it was all thanks to the bracelet he was wearing on his wrist. As for the four, they weren't able to believe their eyes that this kid somehow blocked a full-power direct fire spell using nothing but his hand. And since that was the case, the woman realized they might be in trouble because clearly they weren't anywhere near strong enough to stand up to this guy. Plus, what she just saw could only be achieved by using a bloodline ability, meaning this guy was probably a noble-class wizard. Luckily for them, instead of retaliating, our hero repeated his words once more that he wasn't the one who attacked this village. But still, next time if an attack comes his way, he warned he won't just defend himself. Yeah, just those words were enough to make the woman pause and reconsider this whole situation. Plus, with that girl in his hands, attacking him directly could prove dangerous. So she reluctantly lowered her weapon. Plus, she somewhat believed the kid, since why would anyone cause such tragedy and then stick around just to save a child? So to ease the tension, she introduced herself as Bison. With pleasantries out of the way, she made one thing clear. He still wasn't getting off the hook so easily and asked if he had any proof to prove his innocence. Well, apparently that proof was sleeping in his arms right now, so he suggested they wait for the child to wake up since she seemed to have seen the real culprit. That part shocked the woman since no one knew who that man was and what he looks like, so they referred to him as the arsonist, and was even more surprised when she heard this was our boy's first time hearing that nickname, since that guy was a celebrity around these parts. Apparently he is a mad mage who committed this atrocity, and this village isn't his only victim. For the past few months he's been periodically attacking isolated villages like this one, and the result is the same everywhere he shows up. And since there are never any survivors, they don't even know if it's a male or a female, so in the end, people started referring to this individual as the arsonist. Cut a bit, and the child was finally up and was describing the guy to the gang who was wearing a red cloak and had a beard. Plus, he looked like a lumberjack. Yeah, all four of them froze for a whole minute after listening to that description, after which they turned towards the kid standing behind them, who didn't come anywhere close to what the child had just described. And realizing they overreacted, all of them apologized to the kid for acting impulsively and pointing their weapons at him. For some reason, this reminded our hero of Maidan, who also came to apologize to him for his men's mistake, which was a quality of an honest and good leader. And since these guys struck him the same way, he decided to overlook it this one time. After all, they were just concerned about the child's safety back then. Changing topics, he asked if they came here looking for that arsonist guy, and the answer was a yes, but they ended up making things worse somehow. But at least not everything was a loss, since now that they have a description of that person, their friend here could easily track him down. That surprised our hero, since he didn't expect to come across a member of the Heir family in these lands, since of course they don't have a reputation for being welcome in these parts. But Bumpkin quickly clarified that wasn't the case. They were all from the Carmane family and came here from Abicha. As for the girl, she is Asha, a descendant of someone whose ancestors mixed blood with a Zahar noble, so her bloodline manifested weakly, resulting in her being really good at tracking but not so much when it comes to concealment. Well, that's enough about Asha. They had more important things to worry about, like tracking that man before he does the same thing in some other village. So she asked if our hero could lend them his strength in hunting down the arsonist. She offered to hand him the whole reward for that man's capture along with the share of his mana. All she wants is the merit for the mission. Before giving her an answer, our hero asked if she knows anything about that man's power level. All she could say was that man is a noble level mage. And the reason she was so confident about that was because some of the villages that man attacked were under the protection of several knights, and that man managed to take down all of them. Well, apparently that was exactly the thing our hero needed right now, since he was at a level that the weak demonic beasts aren't increasing his strength anymore. And since he would be getting the reward money as well, he had no reason to say no and accepted the girl's request. But first things first, he needed to make sure the child was safe and taken care of. So they visited a nearby village where he entrusted the girl to the village chief along with enough money to raise her until she's grown up. But just to be clear, he warned the man that in a few years he was going to return to check in on the child, and if he found the child wasn't well taken care of or he used that money on himself, he would personally end him. Yeah, the man completely understood and assured the kid there was no need to worry. Cut a couple of minutes, and they were back in that destroyed village where Asha was seen using her tracking ability to catch the scent of that man. After a bit, they were seen walking around the place so the girl could catch a whiff of that man's trail, and luckily, it didn't take her that long to track down that man's footprints. And with that part taken care of, she began putting that nose of hers to work. Since our hero was also pretty skilled in tracking, he was curious to know the girl's method since that's not how he does it. She explained she starts by looking for any human footprints, and when she does, she just follows the scent of ash covering that man's body, and if he is still wearing the same clothes, finding that person becomes much easier. Not sure why, but our hero was somewhat impressed by how professional the girl was, even though his tracking is 100 times better than hers. That's when he heard the girl telling the gang she managed to pick up on the trail. With that, they arrived outside of a hidden cave where that smell led them, and knowing the place could be booby-trapped, she asked our hero to take point while the rest of them would cover their backs. Following her commands, they slowly began making their way into the place. But since they didn't see anyone, she asked Aisha if she was sure, and the girl answered yes, there was definitely one person hiding inside of this place. With that, they were seen making their way deeper into the place, but still no luck. The place was completely empty. That was until the girl spotted light coming not far from them, and following the source, they found themselves standing inside a chamber where a man was seen standing in the middle. And man, I don't know what this guy is smoking, but he needs to stop because he looks like a mix of psychosis, withdrawal, organ failure, and straight-up body decay. Our hero, though, just to double-check, asked Asha if that's the guy they had been looking for, and the answer was a yes. But not to repeat the same mistake like they did with our boy, Bison, stepped up and asked for the man's identity, and if he was the one responsible for burning down those villages along with the people living there. And to answer her question, the guy raised his hand and boom, an explosion covered all of them in one go, while the three weaker ones were immediately out of the fight and were tossed out of the flames like garbage. As for our boy, his bracelet came into clutch once more, and thanks to that, he managed to save Bison as well. This shocked the man since he wasn't expecting them to survive from that blast. Using the chance, Bison fired one of her ice arrows towards the guy, and the thing pierced into the man's thigh, and he immediately fell to his knees. Injured, yes, but he wasn't out of the fight just yet, so he did something using his hand. And massive hands made out of stone manifested inside the cave. This was something new to our hero since that man was clearly a flame bloodline type. So how was he able to use earth bloodline magic as well? But reacting quickly, he managed to leap out of the way and saved himself, completely forgetting about our beautiful waifu who got crushed underneath the massive hand. But there was no time to be worrying about others, so he immediately got into position, spun his sling, realizing this could end badly. The guy raised his hand once more to attack, but by then it was already too late and the guy's whole arm was seen flying through the air as red liquid bursted out of his shoulder. But the kid wasn't done. He moved in closer to get in range, snapped his fingers to create electricity in his hand, and blasted the fool with a full power shock, prompting the already half-dead man to writhe in agony. And just as quickly, he began losing consciousness. As soon as the man was down, his stone hands also began to break away. Looking ahead, the girl saw our hero standing over the unconscious body of the guy. But just to be on the safe side, she asked if that man was breathing, and the answer was a yes, plus he reminded the girl she should be more worried about her friends and suggested she go and check up on them instead. With her gone, he brought out some seeds from his pocket and tossed the things next to the unconscious man, resulting in those vines appearing and wrapping tightly all around the man. But knowing the man was dangerous, he covered his eyes with a cloth as well to block off his vision. With him fully restrained, he poked at the guy's head, telling him to wake up. As soon as he regained consciousness, the first thing the man did was open his mouth to chant a spell to break himself free. But our hero was one step ahead of him, so he pressed his blade against his throat, warning the man that if he sensed even a trace of mana being released from his body, he won't hesitate in ending him. With that, all of them gathered around the man to start the questioning and asked if he was the arsonist or not, but the man refused to say anything and kept quiet, and that earned him a stab in his other leg. After all, with the kind of things this man did, he deserved something far worse than death. But still, he needed answers before that, so our boy asked the reason for burning all those villagers, and the answer shocked all of them as the man claimed it was a voice that told him to do it. And according to that voice, if he burned the flesh and souls of sinners, he could gain more power. That answer scared the rest, since this man was clearly unstable. But the guy didn't stop and kept insisting, saying this was the way of obtaining other bloodlines, so all he needs to do is burn a few more people and he could finally obtain the flame bloodline as well. As for the four, none of them were buying that crap coming from his mouth. After all, how can ending humans grant a person new bloodlines? But our hero, on the other hand, was a different story, and at that time he recalled similar words he heard from another person's mouth, who claimed a normal person can also awaken powers by taking down demonic beasts, and that person was none other than Mei Dan. And after seeing the man fight, it further confirmed for our hero what this man was saying wasn't just delusions of a madman. And at that moment, he thought to himself that perhaps he finally understood the secret of this world and these powers. Next chapter, and a slash was seen across the guy's throat. And just like that, his motionless body fell to the ground right in front of all the stunned knights. Apparently, one of them had a weak stomach and he wasn't able to bear the sight, so he almost puked. As for why a person who is supposed to be battle-hardened and used to such things was acting in such a way, it was because seeing someone getting taken out while being tied up felt less of an execution and more like slaughter. But Bison chimed in, reminding the guy not to feel sorry for that man, reminding him how, if it weren't for Tehran, all of them would have been lying on the ground in the pool of their own blood right now. Besides, after the kind of heinous crimes that man committed, he got off easy. In fact, no amount of torture would have been enough to atone for the crimes he committed. As they were talking, Tehran made his way towards the book belonging to the guy and was left surprised after seeing the kind of things that were written in those pages. Well, first it had a map with all the places marked that the guy targeted to carry out his twisted experiments, which was proof enough to prove he was the arsonist. But that wasn't the only thing in that book. The thing that caught his eye were all these strange formulas which he had never seen before in his life, and he wondered if this knowledge could also have been taught to that man by those voices. Just then he heard Bison's voice calling his name, as the girl reminded the guy they don't have much time and suggested they get started with absorbing that man's mana and head back to report what they saw here. Turin agreed, and all of them surrounded the lifeless body of the man and began absorbing all his magical energy, and before they knew it, they were standing before a whole town who came there to congratulate all of them for taking down the arsonist, especially Bison, since she was the one who hogged all the credit, which also improved her family's reputation. Cut a couple of minutes, and the girl was handing our boy the promised reward money while asking what his next plans were, to which Turin replied he still hadn't changed his mind about heading for Abisha. That was a shame for the girl since she wanted him to join them, but not like she could force him. So instead, she leaned in closer and reminded the guy what they heard the arsonist say in that cave. Turin knew exactly what she was implying, so he assured the woman not to worry since he won't be speaking a word of that to anyone. After all, the whole continent will plunge into chaos if that rumor spreads. Just like that, all of them said their farewells, hoping to see each other once again in the future. The scene cuts once more to the desert, where our boy was seen once again traveling all alone through the vast wasteland to get to his destination. And after walking for so long, he noticed that the air around him was getting more humid with each step he took. So to check if his suspicions were correct, he snapped his finger and sure enough, his firepower had dropped significantly, while his mana consumption pretty much had doubled. But on the other hand, water magic was much more easier to use now, which would only mean one thing. He has finally reached Abisha, his first stop to his destination. Scene cuts to an inn where a bunch of men were seen discussing about sailing out tomorrow. But there was one problem. Their ships had been under constant attacks by the merfolk, which has made traveling difficult for merchants like them. As if that wasn't bad enough, they also have to deal with pirates, which made things even worse. And the man was sure if this kept up, instead of paying wages, they'd be paying for their soldiers' funerals instead. While they were talking, another person was seen slowly making their way towards their table. Turning around, the guy saw our hero standing there asking if they were headed towards Enril Desert. The answer was a yes, but they weren't planning on taking passengers since their ship doesn't have extra room for one. The only way they'd be able to take another person was if they unloaded a barrel of booze, which was something impossible, since that goes against his principles. Instead of answering, our boy just placed his hand on the mug on the table, and the next thing all of them saw left them wide-eyed, because apparently the person standing before them was a knight. The moment they realized that, the whole bar jumped to their feet to properly greet our hero while apologizing profusely. But Turin told them to talk to him normally since he was the one who came here asking for their help. Curious Eyepatch asked why Turin wanted to travel with lowly merchants like them, to which Turin told him he was simply heading in the same direction as they were. Plus, he wanted to travel with them as a hire, not a passenger, which would mean they would have his full protection in case of any attacks from merfolk or the pirates. Well, that was good and all, but their ship was dirt poor, clearly not something decent enough for someone of his status to sail on. Well, Turan didn't care about comfort, all he wanted was reaching his destination. Well, since everything was working in his favor, plus it sounded too good to be true, the guy asked if he really was sure about this. After all, he could find any ship and travel in luxury. And since it was clear the boy really didn't care about any of that, the guy hired him on the spot as their very new bodyguard. Story cuts, and now we are in some other part of the empire, in a place that most definitely had seen better days. And on the streets, a man who looked awfully similar to Aziz was seen panting for some reason. And that reason was standing right before him. A face only a mother could love, because damn, that thing looks like a cross between an ugly elf and an even uglier goblin stitched together. But the man didn't care, and he used his blade to slice through the creature's side and ended him. That's when he noticed another one of those ugly bastards charging at him from the back. So reacting quickly, the man managed to drive his blade through the creature's skull, which gave another one of those monsters the chance it needed, so it lunged at the soldier from his blind spot. Oh damn, this guy may have a face of a side character, but he's no ordinary side character. Dude has eyes at the back of his head because he instantly turned around and ended that creature as well. But the problem was that there seemed to be no end to these creatures because they kept pouring in from every direction, and the man knew that if this went on much longer, he'd eventually be overwhelmed. Just then, as all hope seemed lost, the sky began to darken with massive dark clouds forming all around the place. And then boom, a miracle happened. Powerful lightning bolts shot towards the ground, burning all the enemies surrounding the man into a crisp. Surprised, the guy turned to see who saved him and found Mesa flying down to assess the situation. And since this man managed to take down most of the monsters in this location, she praised him for an excellent job and ordered him to retreat and regroup with the rest of the knights. The guy obeyed and began making his way back to the main force. That's when another man appeared in the frame who seemed concerned about Misa and was asking if she was alright. As for his identity, this guy is the vice commander of the Arabian subjugation forces named Kadram Arabian, and also Misa's uncle. And since the girl was claiming she was fine, he suggested she refrain from fighting on the front lines since she was worth more than 1 or 2 knights. Changing topics, Mesa asked about the situation in the city, and the answer was everything seemed to be under control, and he was sure soon they would be able to retake this entire region from these dark elves. But the problem was they still weren't able to find some tunnel they had been searching for. So the girl instructed the guy to keep searching and let her know the moment they find anything, since she was planning on heading there herself. After she was done speaking, she simply turned around and began flying towards the next location to provide assistance to her men. And that pissed the guy off because she was too disobedient and was actively risking her life for no reason, knowing full well how important she was to their family. And he was sure if she kept this up any longer, she would end up just like her mother and brother. Scene cuts once more. And now we are over a beautiful ocean with waves crashing below. And somewhere in the distance, a ship could be seen making its way forward. And on it was our boy who was staring at the endless sea. And the only thing that was going through his head at the moment was how was he going to find clues related to his parents' origins and truth, since even if he makes it to the land, the place was huge and unfamiliar, and a stranger suddenly appearing with questions would definitely draw attention. Plus, he still had no clue about the circumstances his parents left that land, meaning barging into House Zahar blindly would be dangerous. Not to mention the only thing he brought with him was a portrait of his mother along with some of her belongings, which certainly wasn't enough to walk into one of the most powerful houses on the continent and start asking questions. As all that was going through his head, another person was slowly sneaking up on him, and turns out it was that same eye patch guy who was wondering what was their meat shield doing, just staring into the distance, instead of keeping a watch for merfolk. And since Turan couldn't exactly tell the guy he was coming up with a plan to infiltrate one of the most dangerous and powerful families on the continent to find out who his parents really were before getting married, he answered he was just admiring the sea since this was his first time seeing the sea with his own eyes. That was cool and all, but the guy warned the kid about seasickness, since they didn't want him leaning over the railing 1 minute and becoming shark food the next. After all, he was their responsibility until they reached their destination. Plus, he heard from some of his men how Turan had been showing interest in learning how to sail a ship, which he made clear was none of his business, but he just wanted to know if he was planning on turning into a sailor like the rest of them. The answer was no. He was just curious since sailing a ship seemed a lot more fun than he expected. Just then, while they were talking, they heard one of the sailors calling for everyone to come eat since it was mealtime, which was music to Eyepatch's ears since he was starving, so he immediately dropped interrogating our boy and shouted for his men to head to the galley. After a bit, Turan was seen enjoying the 5-star dish prepared for him, 4 boiled what seemed to be potatoes with a bit of rice to the side. And in front of him was an old man lecturing him about how the ship food sucks, but it's on purpose, because if it weren't for these sour potatoes, all of them would have perished from the gum disease. Surprised, Turan asked what this gum disease was. The old man explained it was a condition where a person's gums bleed out until their body is severely weakened, and then they just die, and the sour food they are eating helps cure that problem. That was quite interesting, and Turan wanted to know how all of them figured out sour food was a cure for it. Well, even the old man had no idea, It was just something discovered by somebody at some point, and eventually that knowledge spread among sailors. Which was a good thing, because before that, people used to think eating raw mermaids was the cure for it, and obviously it was not. Just then, as they were talking, they heard a man's voice shouting for everyone to get on their guard because another ship was slowly approaching them from the side. Captain's first question was if it was a pirate ship, but the guy wasn't sure because that vessel had no family banner. Yeah, that confirmed it for all of them. It's most definitely a pirate ship. And since that was the case, all the men were ordered to grab their weapons and be ready for anything. The old man himself was curious about what Eyepatch was thinking, so he asked what his plan was, since outrunning that ship was going to be difficult, since that thing is clearly faster than theirs. But there was still a chance they might be able to outrun them and make it to a nearby island if the wind stayed with them. But Eyepatch had something else in mind, so he assured the old guy there was no need to worry because he had a hunch they will be fine. So he ordered his men to turn the ship around because they were going to be facing those pirates head-on. Just like that, it was on. Both vessels began closing in on one another. And sure enough, the men on the other ships started shouting demands for them to surrender their cargo while promising to spare their lives if they cooperated. Yeah, but the old man knew exactly what they meant by spare their lives. It meant chopping off their legs and tossing them overboard to be eaten by the sharks. And since that was the case, Turan got ready to deal with the pests and leaped towards their ship. And just like that, he landed right in the middle of dozens of men, which scared the hell out of them because this was probably their first time seeing a human make such a ridiculous jump. But they still hadn't realized the person they were trying to attack was a knight, and were so focused on him that they completely failed to notice the countless shards of ice that had already surrounded their ship. And that mistake cost them dearly, because those things came in like cannon shots, piercing through anything and anyone unlucky enough to be in their path. And no, Turan wasn't planning on sparing a single one of them because he knew exactly what would happen if even one pirate managed to escape. As for the rest of the men, after seeing what happened to their friends, none of them had the guts to take even a single step towards our hero. That's when one of them, clearly with the IQ of a rock, shouted for everyone to man up and attack the guy at once, since he was sure he wouldn't be able to catch them off guard a second time. So the men obeyed, followed his lead, and began charging at our hero from all sides. Turan also got ready to get serious, so he activated his water magic and a large amount of water started flying towards the ship. But instead of attacking the men, the thing began taking the form of a sword in our hero's hands. And boom, he swung that thing, and you can see with your own eyes what happened to the guy because I am not describing that. With the first man down, he turned towards the rest of them and managed to block their sword strikes with his blade, swung his sword to throw them off balance, and with them unable to block anymore, this fight is getting too brutal now, but let's just say he gave them light taps on their foreheads with his sword, which is not a pleasant experience if you're on the receiving end of it. While doing so, he sensed another guy sneaking up behind him, so he immediately got out of the way of the spear and carved a massive gash right through the middle of the guy's body, grabbed his spear and took out a third guy, or maybe a fourth. Honestly, keeping count is becoming difficult because he is dropping people left and right, but there was no end to them, and they kept on coming, and Turan was forced to leap back a little to give himself some breathing room. But in reality, he was simply luring those men into a trap, and the moment they got within range, he did something with his sword, and boom, a razor-sharp wave of water carved through all of them. And just like that, the whole ship fell silent with most of the pirates lying motionless on the deck. That was when one of the men who somehow survived managed to catch Turan by surprise, and before our boy could react, the guy poked him in the neck with his dagger. Following that, 2 more pirates appeared and managed to drive their weapons through Turan's torso. But even after all that, the first guy was the one with terror written all over his face. Because Turan wasn't just standing there, he was glaring at him with those rage-filled eyes. As for his blade, that thing didn't do jack. Same thing for the other 2. It was like his skin was made out of metal, that even their weapons weren't able to pierce through it. As they were trying to make sense of what they were seeing, Turan ended the first guy, and same thing for the other 2. They also got taken down in a brutal manner. But not letting up, he began targeting some of the other survivors, and the rest was pretty predictable. Turan carving through every single one of the pirates he came across, with the whole ship filling up with screams of agony. And before he knew it, the whole place had fallen silent with not even a single pirate left standing. As soon as that happened, multiple hooks were seen flying onto the ship. Turning around, he saw Eyepatch along with his crew boarding the vessel to loot whatever they could get their hands on. And no, although they looked suspicious as fuck, they weren't turning against our hero to rob him. Instead, they were so hyped that they started cheering for the guy. Turning to the side, Turan noticed a doctor asking him to let him take a look at those wounds on his body just to be safe. But Turan assured the man he was completely unharmed. As for this blood, it belonged to those pirates, not him. Cut a couple of hours and both vessels were seen sailing across the sea. And inside one of the cabins of their newly acquired ship, Eyepatch was reporting to our hero about his findings after searching the whole thing. And turns out this is one of merchant ships that went missing from a beach a few years ago, and now they know what happened to it. These pirates took over it, took out the crew, and had been using it as their own ever since. But that wasn't the important thing right now. The more important question at the time was what was Turan planning on doing with this vessel? After all, he was the one who took over it, meaning he was now the owner of this ship. Yeah, that came out of nowhere because sailing across the ocean in search of One Piece wasn't in our boy's checklist at the moment, so he had no idea what to say to the man. So he asked the guy for advice because he wasn't cut out for the life of a pirate. Well, he basically has two options right now. First was to take this ship back to Ibiza and return it back to whoever owns this thing, and ask for a reward, but that would take him around a month or two. So he suggested the second option, which was to sell the thing in the Elril Desert. Apparently that place had a huge demand for ships at the moment, meaning Turan could get a very good price for it. Of course, he couldn't exactly do that by himself because transporting something that massive required a proper crew. Luckily, Eyepatch was willing to provide one in exchange for 10% of the profits from selling the ship. Yeah, well, our boy had something else in mind. So he offered 20%, but he would have to take care of everything, from getting the thing to that place to finding the highest bidder, because that job was too exhausting for him. Well, more money is always good, so Eyepatch agreed. And now, motivated by the promise of a bigger cut, he promised to find them the highest paying buyer possible. That's when suddenly the door to the place swung open and a man was seen entering into the cabin with urgent news. Apparently they found a mermaid, which was just great because they just got done taking care of those pirates, and now they needed to deal with those mermaids as well. But the man clarified they weren't under attack. Instead, they found a mermaid tied up below the deck on this ship. Cut to the outside, and the old man was seen leading the two men towards the place where they found the mermaid. And while making their way to see the creature, not sure why, but Turan asked the men if they could sell these mermaids for money. And the answer was a yes, but only if they are attractive female mermaids. Because apparently there are some sick rich nobles out there who like to collect such women from different species because they are so fucking messed up in the head that normal human women don't satisfy them anymore. Eventually they arrived at the place. That's when Turan's eyes landed for the first time on a real breathing mermaid. And it was just a child, which, according to Eyepatch, was a bummer since he had his hopes up for nothing. So he asked Turan what should they do with this creature, because unless it's a legendary noble who possesses the ability to transform, no one was going to pay them a dime for the thing. Hearing the guy blabbering on and on, the kid finally lost it and demanded they treat him with respect. After all, he was the 47th prince of the Northern Estadal. Well, guess he should have kept his mouth shut because now they knew this boy was going to fetch them a handsome price. But on the other hand, Eyepatch wasn't completely convinced because he might just be bluffing, since this was the only way he could stay alive. So to verify if what he was saying was really true, he asked the boy to turn into a fish or something. Well, gladly, but first they would need to untie him and throw him in some water for his powers to work. Yeah, both men knew this kid was just pulling their leg. Plus, according to Eyepatch, these mermaids also feed on humans, so they couldn't exactly just free this creature. Yeah, Turan agreed, which only left them with one final option, which was to end the creature, since he was worthless to them. Looking at those eyes, the mermaid kid realized this man wasn't playing around. He was seriously getting ready to end him. So he tried begging Turan to stop and not to do this, but when even that didn't work, he went back into his royal persona and demanded he lower his hand and stop whatever he was about to do. Yeah, still no use. So he lowered his voice and told our hero he has never eaten a human before in his life. In fact, that thought never even crossed his mind. Well, this journey really changed Turan for the worst, because even now he refused to stop and was fully intending on ending the child. Desperate and out of options, the kid shouted for the two men to give him a chance to explain and promised to lead them to a hidden treasure in a certain place if they agreed to spare him. Yeah, well, that one seemed to do the trick, because now even Turan was interested and asked what kind of a treasure was he talking about. Well, it was some overpowered equipment or something left behind by the wizards of old times, and according to the kid, he knew the location of that item. Just like that, a couple of days flew by and they arrived at their first destination, which was great news for the sailors, since they had finally reached land and were already planning to gulp down an entire barrel of booze to celebrate. As for Turan, he had something else on his checklist. Apparently, the place that boy mentioned wasn't far from this island, so he was planning on heading there in a couple of hours to see with his own eyes whether the boy had actually been telling the truth. Before they knew it, the sun had already set, and Turan and the mermaid boy were now in a small boat getting ready to paddle their way to the spot. And the boy wasn't happy with how he was still being treated as a slave, so he demanded our boy untie the chains around his arm, promising he wasn't going to use the chance to run away. Plus, he wanted to know if our hero would keep his end of the bargain and release him after finding the treasure. Turan assured the kid he would and suggested he hold on tight because they were about to move. Eventually, they arrived at the place, so Turan decided to leave the boy on the boat for now and dive down to find that treasure. Cut to the bottom of the ocean, and he was seen swimming his way towards the place, and eventually came across an unexpected sight. So he stopped to take a second look to make sure what he was seeing was really real. Because right there before him was a massive, and I mean absolutely massive, snake-like creature. Story cuts back a couple of minutes when both of them were on their way to the location. Eventually they came across an island which, according to the mermaid boy, was the spot where that treasure was hidden. But before setting foot on the shore, Turan decided to do a quick check of his surroundings, and using his search magic, he began looking for any possible hostile creatures lurking nearby. Surprisingly, the only thing he picked up with his sonar magic was fish, which was good because he was afraid the child might have led him to a mermaid base. And since that wasn't the case, he docked the boat and got out with the kid. Well, at first, the boy had no clue where they were supposed to go, but eventually they arrived at a familiar location, which helped the kid remember where the treasure was hidden. So he pointed toward a nearby pond. Well, the first question by our hero was how deep this thing was, and according to the boy, not deep at all, only let's say 300 meters. Yeah, that reaction by Turan is justifiable because 300 meters is pretty damn deep. But first things first, he needed to make sure the kid doesn't run away or try anything while he was searching for whatever it was down there, so he tied him up to a tree, which was bad for the kid because if something were to happen to Turan down there, he was going to starve to death. Yeah, well, he better hope that doesn't happen for his sake and for Turan's as well. After making himself clear, he took a deep breath and jumped in to find this so-called treasure. And with that, we arrived back in the present where Turan was seen staring at the massive serpent in disbelief. And no, that thing isn't alive, which is obviously a good thing for our boy, but even more surprising was a humanoid figure sitting atop the monster's head. And Turan was so shocked seeing that man that he actually gasped for air and was immediately reminded he can't breathe underwater. After getting a hold of himself, he began swimming towards the giant serpent to see who the man was, and saw a massive fang of that snake going through the guy's torso, meaning their fight ended in a draw. But what was even more shocking was the condition of the corpse. The body was completely intact. Not to mention, this man must have been absurdly powerful during his lifetime to be able to take down something like this. Plus, even after who knows how many years, the corpse still hadn't turned into a wraith despite the man possessing such an insane amount of mana. But ignoring that, he swam towards a glowing piece of item on the man's side, and turns out it was a compass of some kind. Cut back to the fish boy, who was still waiting for our hero to swim out of the pond. And eventually he did, which came as a huge relief, because he was afraid he might have drowned down there, leaving him all alone on this island. Plus, he wanted to know if Turan found the treasure he mentioned or not, and luckily he did, which meant the kid wasn't lying. Just then, Turan noticed something strange about the boy, a bright blue flame burning around his chest and ears. And no, it wasn't because the kid was going through some transformation. The reason he was able to see those flames was because of the compass in his hand. Realizing how valuable the artifact was, he decided to free the boy since he had upheld his side of the bargain. This sudden decision surprised the kid because he was convinced Turan would simply take the treasure and sell him to the highest bidder anyway, but was reminded they had a deal. He fulfilled his part, so now it was Turan's turn to follow through on his promise. Armani didn't know how to thank the kid, so he promised our hero that if ever in the future a war broke out between humans and mermaids, he would ask his father to spare his life. Yeah, well, Turan simply told the boy to stop talking nonsense and scram. The boy obeyed and immediately jumped into the pond. That's when Turan saw him transform into a shark, which meant what the kid had been saying all this time was actually true. He truly was one of the royals. Cut to the next day, and some commotion could be heard on Eyepatch Man's ship. And the reason was all the men on their butts with massive slash wounds on their backs. And no, they didn't get attacked, but the one who was responsible for those wounds was that same sweet old man who apparently wasn't all that sweet after all. All that commotion caught our hero's attention, so he came out to see what was going on, and upon asking, was informed these men spent the whole night partying and drinking with women. So they were late to board the ship, and to make it worse, they caused a ruckus at the port tavern, so now they were being punished for it. Instead of saying anything, Turan kept staring at the men because thanks to that new artifact in his possession, he was able to see the flames of all those men, and the ones he was more curious about were the ones getting hit by that whip, since their flames were actively burning away with each strike. Changing topics, he asked about the captain and was informed the man went out to attend a meeting with a buyer who was interested in purchasing his ship. Cut to Eyepatch, who was sitting inside some tavern discussing their business with the buyer. That's when his eyes landed on something unexpected. Turns out it was Turan who had personally come to finalize the deal himself. So the guy properly introduced his friend, a man by the name of Captain Samuel. As for their deal, they have settled on 1,000 gold coins, which would be paid in full up front. The offer was generous, but there was just one problem. And when asked what, Turan explained traveling with such a large amount of gold was a pain. So instead, he asked if he could pay him with magic items or sacred relics instead. He had no problems with that, but the thing was finding such items in this place was pretty much impossible. So he suggested he head for a place called Komad. Apparently that place is the second largest city in Zahar territory, ruled by the Durman family, and they possess a tamer bloodline, and he was sure he could easily get his hands on a useful beast there with that kind of money. Yeah, that was a good suggestion. After all, if he manages to get his hands on an animal that can understand what he was saying, that could prove quite useful on his journey. Fast forward, and the ship was once more seen sailing the winds towards its next stop, with the crew in really good mood since not only did they have a wizard protecting them, they also got a cut from that gold, even though they didn't do jack during that pirate fight. But apparently these people are like disaster magnets because right in the middle of their celebration, they heard the man in the crow's nest shouting for everyone to brace themselves because they were heading straight into a storm. And just like that, their ship was thrown across raging waves that looked fully capable of flipping the entire vessel over. On deck, Old Man was shouting orders to everyone to bring down the sails and move all the cargo below deck. Following his commands, the crew hurried to secure everything before something terrible happened, and then something terrible happened. A massive wave slammed into the side of the ship, resulting in the whole thing tilting violently, causing most of the men who were working to bring down the sails to go flying down the vessel. And just then, as they were about to slam into the bottomless ocean and disappear forever, something unexpected happened, as all of them found themselves floating over the surface of the water instead. Turns out it was our boy using his water magic to save the crew, and after placing them safely back aboard, he ordered everyone to get a grip and find cover. The men obeyed immediately and started running for shelter before they got tossed overboard a second time. With everyone now safely out of danger, Turan started using his magic on the ship to quickly finish the job and transferred all the cargo under the deck along with the sails. And before they knew it, he was done with everything, and the rest was up to the fate, whether they were going to sink or make it out of this storm. Cut to the men who were visibly shaken and doing their best not to start freaking out because of all this violent rocking of the ship. And to the side was Turan with the men whom he just saved, thanking him for everything. But Turan was more concerned about all of them and was asking if anyone was hurt. And luckily, the answer was a no. Eyepatch was also there and was thanking our hero for lending them a hand, because if it weren't for him, he would have lost so many of his men. Still, their situation wasn't exactly great because of the freezing cold and the fact that everyone was soaking wet. Turan noticed that as well, and knowing exactly what might happen if he left things as they were, he decided to do something about it. So he called all of them over, telling them to gather around him. And the reason was he was planning on using his fire magic to heat up the place so nobody froze to death. As for Eyepatch, the moment he saw him use that magic, he wasn't able to believe his eyes because this was the first time in his life he witnessed a magic which was this refined. And at that moment, he finally understood a verse he heard the elders praise, which was humans serve mages and mages reign over humans, but also watch over them. Fast forward to Komud, the largest city in the northern Enril Desert, where a ship was seen docking at the harbor with a bunch of men unloading cargo to be delivered. Not far from the vessel was our boy and Eyepatch, who was handing our boy a sack of gold coins. And no, this one isn't for the ship they sold. Instead, this is for helping all of them throughout the whole journey, which him along with his crew had pooled together as a thank you gift. Turan tried to refuse, but the man insisted. After all of them would have perished the moment they came across those pirates, not to mention everything else he did for them. So in the end, Turan accepted the generous gesture and promised that if they ever crossed paths again, he would treat all of them to a meal. Just then, as he was about to walk away, he heard a voice calling out to him from behind. Turning around, he found all the friends he made during this little journey, cheering for him while thanking him for everything and promising they would never forget him. And with that, Turan's voyage finally came to an end, as he bid farewell to all of them with a smile on his face. Scene cuts, and we are now in a more bustling part of the city. And somewhere in that crowd, Turan was seen walking around looking for a way to get close to the main head of the family, who rules over this land. That's when his eyes landed on an individual who seemed to possess much more mana compared to the ordinary people around him, which would mean that man was also a knight. So he walked up to the man and called out to him. And the moment that guy sensed the terrifyingly absurd amount of mana surging behind him, his whole body stiffened up. So he immediately turned around, lowered his head, and without even daring to look at Turan's face, asked what his orders were. If there was one thing Turan learned from this journey, it was never to show weakness in front of anyone unless you wanted them walking all over you. So he used his authority as a knight and ordered the man to take him to his house head since he wanted to have an audience with the man. Cut a couple of minutes, and we are now outside the massive palace of House Durmin. And inside, Turan could be seen rocking his new outfit, which was provided to him by his hosts. And in front of him was a man overflowing with mana who was welcoming him to his house. As for his identity, this man is Cal Durmin, the head of House Durmin. Cal himself noticed something about the kid, and that got him curious about his identity. And our boy seemed to notice that as well. But before he could ask, Cal spoke up and asked for our hero's name and which house he belonged to. Our boy introduced himself as Turan Brahms, a descendant from a fallen guardian bloodline. As for the reason of this visit, it was because he wished to purchase one of their beasts. Well, if that was the case, then there was no need for him to personally get involved in this matter, so he asked our hero to wait for his daughter, who would show him around. Turan still had a question, so he asked the guy if by any chance he ever came across someone who looks like him. Well, that was a very strange question, so the guy asked him to clarify, and was reminded how he showed a bit of hesitation when he first saw his face. Cal apologized for reacting like that earlier. It's just that his face reminded him a little of someone he once knew. Fast forward, and he was seen following a woman to the place where they kept all their beasts, who was commenting on how he was fairly well off for someone from a ruined noble family, considering he came all the way to House Durmin to buy a monster. Oh boy, hands down the most beautiful woman introduced in this series. That's 10 out of 10 right there, and look at the fool behind her, not even paying attention to such a beauty walking right in front of him. The only thing going through his head at the moment was Cal's earlier words as he wondered who exactly that man saw in him. His mother, or perhaps his father. Because he does take a lot after his mother, especially those curly hair. But then again, could that man perhaps be talking about his father, the man whom he had never seen? That's when he got snapped out of those thoughts as he heard the woman telling him they have arrived at the place. As for where this place was, this is the House Derman's breeding grounds. Not even a few steps in, and Turan spotted the first beasts being kept there, which happened to be a pair of wolves. Next up was a literal elephant. Apparently, each enclosure was much bigger than it looked from the outside, with every beast having its own environment designed to suit its needs. That's when Turan's eyes landed on a scrawny-looking horse. So he asked for the price and nearly choked when he heard the words 4,000 gold coins come out of her mouth, which was just absurd. So he did the obvious thing, closed his mouth, and immediately started looking for something more within his budget. That's when he spotted an eagle, or a hawk, inside a cage that caught his eye. And the reason he stopped for that creature wasn't because the thing looked majestic, but because that creature was staring right into his soul. So he asked the girl about the bird and how much was it. And luckily, this one was somewhat affordable since it only costed 1,500 coins. Well, that was good and all, but first he wanted to know what could that bird do, and was utterly disappointed when he heard that creature was intelligent and a strong flyer, because he was hoping for the thing to possess some special abilities. But the girl assured him not to judge it so quickly. The only reason that thing was so cheap was because that creature was too clever for its own good and absolutely refuses to obey anyone because it has a very judgmental personality. So to test if what she was saying was really true, Turan began conversing with the bird, and surprisingly, the creature began reacting. And sure enough, when he suddenly called it ugly looking, he saw anger building up on the bird's face. And that confirmed it for him. This bird could truly understand human language. Well, that was only scratching the surface of how intelligent the creature was, because it belonged to one of the most famous companion pets their family trains. And this species also has the ability to read and write, but this one refused to learn anything she tried teaching it. Which was a shame because its size and physical strength were exceptional. If only it was obedient, it would be worth a lot more. As she was talking, she heard Turan asking the bird if there was something that it wanted, so she told the kid he was wasting his breath on that creature since it was too stubborn to listen to anybody. But to her surprise, she saw the creature raising its talon and it was pointing right at Turan. This surprised her since never before had that bird reacted in such a way to any noble or knight who visited this place. As for Turan, he was also curious to know what the bird meant by that and asked if it was saying he wanted him, and the thing nodded yes. So he asked the reason. After all, he wasn't anything special, so why choose him of all people? Still, he wasn't saying no, but he had one condition. If he spends his gold to buy him, he would have to promise to learn how to read. Well, what do you know? The creature nodded yes to that. Cut a minute or two and Cal was seen performing his family's taming magic to bind both Turan and the bird as partners. And with that, Turan successfully managed to acquire his very first Pokemon. Well, apparently the girl wasn't kidding when she said this bird was quite special, because even Cal was surprised when he heard it chose Turan, which is why he personally came to see if it really was true, and since that was the case, he asked the boy to take good care of it. But then he suddenly stopped since he had a question and asked if by any chance Turan has some connection to a person named Talus. That was the first time Turan was hearing that name, so he answered no and asked about the guy. But Cal just dismissed it and told the kid to forget he said anything. Yeah, well, that was something hard to do since now he was dying to know who this Talus was and why his face reminded Cal of that man. But knowing too many questions would make the guy suspicious, he decided to change topics and instead brought out his mother's picture and asked if he happened to know this woman by the name of Vise. The guy took a closer look at that picture and after a brief pause answered no, with the most sus thing you could say to a boy about his mother, that if he had met such a beauty in his life, he wouldn't have forgotten about her. Lucky for him, Turan decided not to level his whole house to the ground. Instead, he turned towards the bird. So the guy asked what he was planning on doing with that thing, and was met with a smirk from our boy as he told the man he was just making sure his purchase was worth the money. With that, he called the bird over, grabbed tightly onto its leg, and proceeded to fly out of the breeding grounds to see just how far the thing could fly while carrying a person. Fast forward, he was back and was led to the dining area of the palace where most of the Derman family was waiting for him. Cal's daughter, who heard about him taking the bird out for a spin, wanted to know what he thinks about the creature, and obviously she gets 5 stars for raising such a magnificent and powerful creature. Happy with the review, she introduced Turan to the rest of the people in the room as a person who came from the Kamin side. And the muscular one didn't seem to like that at all, since that was the place where those Arabians lived, but was told to pipe down and not to lump their guests with those little sparrows. As for this guy's name, he is Dolph Marin of History Bloodline. But then in the middle of their handshake, the guy suddenly tightened his grip and began squeezing Turan's hand. But thanks to the bracelet made by Mello, most of that force got absorbed by the item, so he was able to overpower the guy quite easily. And that impressed the dude, since Guardian bloodline lives up to its reputation. The scrawny-looking kid was far stronger than he looked. The woman on the side, however, told the man to stop with his childish tests and asked Turan where was that eagle, since the only reason she came here was because she wanted to see it with her own eyes. Turan explained he sent the creature out to fly around for a bit since it had been cooped up inside this home for so long. And since the woman was so insistent on seeing the bird, he decided to call it back. Following his command, the creature flew into the room and landed on Turan's arm. And a nasty grin formed on the woman's face as she commented the rumors about this creature were true. But just as she was about to pet the thing, the creature pecked her hand. And that got the old hag so furious that she began hurling insults at it, demanding an answer for why it never chose her. After all, she could have raised it far better than some fallen noble. Yeah, the creature was itching to claw her face off for making that comment about Turan, but our boy signaled the thing to stay calm. Well, nothing major happened after that. The woman calmed down and all of them sat at the table to eat while discussing about the dark elf tribes that were invading the west. That's when suddenly Turan heard Misa's name being mentioned, who was fighting on the front lines to drive back those elves. And man, this woman is evil as fuck because she was openly hoping that the girl gets assassinated by one of those elves during battle, and how that would be a spectacle if that happens. But they didn't stop there. They continued about how that girl was so scrawny she might just drop dead on her own, and some other nasty stuff about the poor girl. And Turan, man, let me tell you, he was not happy hearing all those things coming out of this old hag's mouth about his friend. Lucky for them, they changed topics before Turan completely lost his temper and started talking about some other family and how they have 3 heirs lined up for succession, but they weren't sure whether they'll choose Raman, Alma, or Purga. And apparently the one who would be choosing the next successor was Talus, the same man Cal mentioned earlier. So using the chance, he asked the girl about this Talus and what kind of a person he was. Apparently that man is the househead's younger brother and currently the second in command of Zahar, but in reality, he was the one running the whole house. Well, now that was interesting, because if his earlier conversation with Cal was anything to go by, and if this Talus somehow turned out to be his father, then that would mean Turan came from a family far more influential than he had ever imagined. Fast forward once more, and our little birdie was seen writing something on the ground using its beak, and right beside him was our hero observing his learning progress. But on the inside, his mind was still stuck on the man named Talus, and the fact that he was second in command of such a powerful house meant that if he truly was his father, then Turan was nothing more than a stain on that man's reputation, meaning that entire house might crush him like a bug the moment they learned of his existence. As he was thinking that, our little birdie finished writing what he wanted to say. And thank heavens the artist cleared things up here, because I was still wondering whether this thing was an eagle or something else. And apparently this creature is a black eagle. Well, it wasn't done, so it began writing once more. And this time he got most of it right, but there were still some spelling mistakes here and there. So Turan pointed them out, but honestly it was still impressive how quickly the bird was learning human language. Plus he wanted to know if the bird has decided on a name yet. Well, the answer was a no. But Turan, trying to take his mind off things, teasingly asked if No was supposed to be his name. Changing subjects, he asked the bird the reason for choosing him as its companion instead of all other nobles who came before him. Well, apparently the thing basically confessed to our boy, since it said he likes him, plus there was something inside of Turan which he felt was similar to him. That answer brought a smile to his face, so he thanked the bird. Still, he seriously misspelled most of those words, so there was definitely room for improvement. Even so, he couldn't help but wonder what was it that the bird saw in him that was different from other nobles. Just then, he heard a voice from the side calling his name. Turning around, he found Dolph Marin, who was inviting our hero to go on a hunt with him. But Turan declined since he was supposed to leave for his next destination today, which was a bummer for the guy. Yeah, but the thing was, Turan wasn't as naive as he used to be, and knew exactly this man was up to no good. That friendly attitude was nothing more than an act. Still, the guy offered to guide him out of these lands. After all, he knew this whole region like the back of his hand, and that statement deeply offended our little bird, since that was supposed to be his job. Still, since Turan refused to accept his help, the man simply turned around and started heading back, which wasn't a good thing since him giving up so easily was making Turan really uneasy. After a while, he was seen making his way toward the outskirts of the city, and with him were 2 knights who were there to escort him out of the territory, which made Turan rather uncomfortable, but since it was an order from Lord Cal, he couldn't exactly complain. So ignoring the men, he walked up to a shop to buy a map along with some religious text regarding Enro. After paying for the things, he started going through the map and noticed that the thing was horribly outdated and badly drawn, but at least the stuff written about the Zahar family was pretty useful, so he wasn't complaining. That's when he spotted something from the corner of his eye, so he turned around and saw a shadowy figure possessing noble-level mana tailing him. And at that moment, he finally realized what was going on. Still, he didn't bother confronting the person and instead calmly left the city without causing any commotion. And for some reason, instead of using the bird to fly his way to the destination, he told the thing to rest up since he was feeling like walking today. This sudden dumb statement obviously surprised the bird, so it gave him that look like, dude, what the heck, I can get us there in less than half the time. But Turan told the thing to trust him on this and follow along. Story cuts a couple of hours and the whole desert was illuminating with moonlight. And somewhere among the dunes, Turan was slowly making his way toward his destination. That is when he suddenly stopped, after which he called out to the person who had been following them, telling him to show himself. Yup, it was just as he had suspected. This bastard Dolph was up to no good and had been tailing him this whole time. But still, he was surprised that the boy knew he was being followed. Yeah, well, why else does he think he chose to walk all this way instead of taking the faster option? Playing dumb, the guy claimed he was just worried about him since he was still a kid wandering around the desert all alone. So he followed him to make sure he doesn't get himself in trouble. Yeah, no, Turan immediately told the guy to drop it with that bullshit act. He knows full well the guy was after his mana from the start. To that, the guy froze for a second, not sure how to respond. And almost immediately, that same messed up grin returned to his face. Because even after knowing that from the start, Turan still allowed himself to be isolated out here. Okay, so apparently this musclehead is from a fallen noble house who joined House Durman, and now his greedy ass is after more power in order to revive or repopulate his house back to glory. And for that he needs Turan's mana, because that thing was unlike anything he had seen his entire life. And he was sure it was going to be a piece of cake, and the reason he still believed that was because this idiot was still mistaking Turan for being a guardian bloodline. Yeah, seeing him underestimating him so much, Turan just had one thing to say to the guy, bring it. After which he told his bird to fly to safety while he takes care of this man. That's when Dolph saw the kid do something completely unexpected, as his body slowly began fading away. As for Turan, while disappearing, he told the man to get ready since he himself had been craving for his mana for quite some time now. But the bastard mistook that bloodline ability as nothing more than a normal concealment magic, something he could quite easily counter simply by sensing his presence. So he raised his fists to square up with Turan. But then as he tried using his magic to detect the boy's presence, he felt absolutely nothing, and that got him wondering what was going on, since he should easily be able to sense where the kid was hiding. And then reality finally started to sink in, and he realized what this meant. But before he could do anything, something came flying in from the back and slammed straight into his skull. Luckily, that thick head of his was somehow sturdier than it looked, so he was pretty much still in one piece. Looking down, he saw a piece of stone lying next to him, and as he got distracted with that, another projectile came flying in and slammed right on his ribs. Then another from the other side, and before he knew it, he was being completely overwhelmed from all sides as he desperately tried to protect his vitals. Furious, he used fire magic to try and flush the kid out, but even that didn't work because he still couldn't sense where Turan was hiding. Suddenly, he noticed a bunch of fireballs hovering in the air in front of him, and those things suddenly began spinning violently like miniature tornadoes, causing the man to panic and run in the opposite direction to get away from the things. But he wasn't fast enough and those things began raining down on him like meteors. Furious, he lifted his leg and boom! With one violent stomp, he slammed it into the ground, creating shockwaves that scattered the incoming flames. And using the chance, he made a break for it, after finally realizing he stood no chance against that boy. But since there was no cover around him nor any place to run to, he shouted for the kid to show himself. But as he looked around, the whole place was still deathly silent. Yeah, no, he realized the kid wasn't messing around, nor did he have any intention of letting him escape, so he desperately started running to try and get out of this death trap, because taking on someone from Zahar bloodline in a desert at nighttime was pretty much suicide. And not sure why, but after reaching some distance, he got confident he was going to outrun him thanks to his physical enhancement. Just as that thought hit his head, he heard flapping sounds coming from above, and found our boy hovering over his head along with his bird. Although the man wasn't anything special, Turan still gave it to him that he was tougher than he expected. Well, not quite at the Guardian's level of tough, but still pretty impressive, because if it were any other noble, they would have collapsed by now. So he asked whether the man happened to be carrying any defensive magic artifacts. But the guy, instead of answering his question, began begging for mercy. Yeah, right, like that was going to happen. So Turan reminded the man it was him who tried to end him first, which meant mercy wasn't on the table anymore, and then blasted the fool with a full power fire attack to reduce him into ashes and absorb all of his mana for himself. Next chapter, and the man was seen reduced to a charred corpse on the ground. And since it was safe to approach him now, Turan landed next to his body and noticed the guy wasn't hiding any defensive artifacts on him. Which wasn't exactly good news, because compared to this guy, a properly trained Zahar wizard would be far harder to take down, meaning he would need to find a stronger weapon, since simply using rocks wasn't going to be enough from this point onward. But that could wait for now. First things first, he needed to just consume the man's mana and get this over with. So he did, and that same green energy began seeping out of the man's body, and this time something unexpected happened, because some of that energy started to get absorbed into the compass he was carrying with him. And since this was his first time seeing something like this, it surprised Turan. So he examined the thing to see what was going on and noticed some kind of green liquid swirling around inside of it. The problem was he still had no clue how to use the artifact, so he decided not to mess with it until he could learn more about it. Cut to the next morning, and Turan was seen flying his way through the desert. And suddenly we went from sand dunes to pyramids, because why not? So basically, no idea why, but he had been searching for this tomb for quite some time now. Scene cuts, and now we are inside some tavern with our hero, once again, finding himself another baddie. At this point, I'm starting to think the guy has a passive skill for attracting beautiful women his way. And gotta give it to the artist, every new woman that shows up somehow outdoes the previous one. As for where this woman came from, no idea. And why was she so casually talking to a complete stranger she just met? Simple. The guy was cute as hell. As for our boy's story, this time he ran away from his home and was traveling all by himself, which according to the girl was reckless, but she was digging it. Still, she was surprised he didn't run into any bandits or monsters on his journey. Yeah, sister, if only you knew. But Turan decided to keep that a secret as well and simply told the woman he just got lucky. But that wasn't important. The reason he started this conversation with her was because he wanted to know a little more about that tomb, and how does one enter that place? Well, it's pretty easy. You pay your way in, because money can buy anything. But for now, she suggested he keep his distance from this place. And when asked why, the girl informed him about some powerful figure that showed up in this place about a week ago, and they locked down the entire place. And because of that, no one was allowed to enter the tomb. Turan asked what powerful figure she was talking about, to which the girl simply raised her finger, and Turan immediately caught on to who she was trying to imply. It were the Zahar family. Cut to the tomb, and a bunch of men were seen panicking, and leading them was a man named Purga, who was ordering everyone to keep their voices down, because they didn't want more of those creatures finding their location. But the guy refused to shut his trap and started blaming him for this whole mess, since he was the one who suggested they come to this tomb. Yeah, well, he never forced anyone. It was their greedy asses who followed him of their own accord, so he suggested the guy stop playing the blame game and shut his trap. But on the inside, the guy himself was panicking because this situation was clearly more dangerous than he expected. Apparently, he heard stories about this place from his elder when he was a child, and how if he manages to solve the secrets of this tomb, he might become the next house head. Because of that obsession, he kept returning to this place year after year, searching for something useful, but always came up empty-handed. Until this time, when he came across this hidden section of the tomb, and after coming so far, he refused to go back empty-handed, because this was probably his only shot at getting the position of family head. But the problem was this whole area was filled to the brim with monsters, and dealing with those numbers was proving far more difficult than expected. Turning to Loudmouth, he asked if they have any water left, and the answer was no, so he suggested the guy get to making some because he desperately needed to wet his throat. Just then, as they were doing that, a voice rang through the entire labyrinth, which was strange, so the guy immediately turned towards the location of the sound, and saw absolutely no one. But that wasn't the only shocking thing here. The thing that had him spooked more was the fact that the voice was speaking in a language he never heard before, but somehow he was still able to understand what it was saying. As for the voice, it was telling these men about some night hunter who has returned to the desert. Cut to the potential night hunter, who was annoyed out of his mind because he wasn't able to enter that tomb because of those Zahar nobles. And more importantly, he never planned on staying in this place for long, since there was a really high probability someone here might also get suspicious of him after seeing his face, just like how it was with Cal. So he decided to lay low for the time being. As he was thinking that, he spotted something in one of the stalls. So he walked up to the man and asked what he was selling, and was informed it was saltpeter, something native to the southern sea islands and incredibly rare to come by. And the reason he was showing so much interest in these things was because he had seen these items somewhere before. That's when he remembered about the journal he found after taking out that arsonist. And sure enough, one of the items mentioned in that book was this very same ingredient, which was something he wasn't able to get his hands on anywhere else. So he immediately purchased some while asking the man whether he also sells sulfur. But surprisingly, this was his first time hearing of something like that. Same thing for the second shop. Although he knew what sulfur was, he told the boy he won't be able to find any around this area since that item was found in volcanic regions. Same story with the third merchant, who practically said the same thing. After checking most of the shops, Turan didn't know what to do anymore, since if he had known about this, he would have bought some of that stuff in Komad. So in the end, he decided to just find a volcano instead of going back to Komad. Scene cuts, and Turan was now seen training with his sling, and you guys might have noticed, instead of using rocks which he normally uses, he was using sand. And I don't think I need to give the reason because results speak for themselves. So apparently sand bullets were far better at piercing hard targets compared to rocks, because he could change the shape of sand mid-flight using his magic, allowing him to either increase the projectile's piercing power or make them scatter to cause wide area damage. Sure, it consumed a bit more mana, but the results were absolutely worth it. Besides, finding rocks in an endless desert was incredibly annoying, so this was a much better alternative. But all that aside, he still had no clue what those nobles were doing inside of that tomb, because it's already been days since he arrived in this place and he still wasn't able to enter into that structure. And since he was wasting time, his first thought was whether he should just head for another city for now, but decided not to, as a stupid plan formed in his mind. And that was to quietly sneak into the place to take a peek at what those men were doing in there that was taking them so long. And his brilliant plan in case he got caught was to run like hell from literal assassins who specialized in tracking their targets to the ends of the earth. As he was going invisible, he noticed strange sounds coming from the side, so he turned around and found two men dragging some kind of a sack towards the pyramid's entrance. And the strange thing was that the sack was moving and making noise. Yep, there was a person inside of that thing who was being taken in there against his will. And since it was getting quite interesting, he decided to follow the men to see what they were planning on doing with that guy. Cut to the inside, and after following the men for some time, he eventually arrived at a large chamber. That's where he noticed some other people who were waiting for the two men, plus a massive swirling portal of some kind that was right beside them. As for the man, the poor guy had no clue what was going on, so he asked the people standing before him why was he brought to this place, but the men refused to answer his question. As for Turan, he noticed something odd about the people, because even though they were the ones kidnapping this man, they seemed more frightened than the victim. All of a sudden, he noticed the kidnapped man's expressions changing, as he suddenly became obedient and started doing everything as he was being told. And no, he wasn't going into that portal of his own free will. The guy was under some kind of a hypnosis magic. Watching the man entering, one of the men couldn't help but wonder if their Lord Purga, along with the knights who accompanied him inside that portal, were still alive, and was reminded all they could do is hope, since they have been continuously sending food and water through the portal. Well, that was true, but the guy was still wondering whether they should report this to the main house and call for reinforcements, and was reminded what would happen to all of them if this news were to reach the main house. Plus, Sir Purga's rivals would surely use it against him to destroy his chances of becoming the next househead. That name reminded Turan of the conversation about the 3 candidates to be the next househead of Zahar that the ugly old hag mentioned, and he started to understand why no one else was allowed to enter into this place. Plus, another stupid idea formed in his head, which was to head in there, save this Purga guy, and put him in his debt, and use that to infiltrate the Zahar family. And for some reason, Turan wasn't feeling like himself anymore. It was almost as if something from inside the portal was calling to him. So he ended up jumping in and began sinking inside the dark swirling gate. After a while, he found himself floating in an endless dark place. And at that moment, he finally regained control over his thoughts and realized what he had just done. As he was making sense of what came over him, he heard a person scream coming from the distance. So he turned to the location and found the same guy who came in here with those barrels, lying on the ground with both his arms broken from the fall. And right next to the guy was Purga, who seemed relieved seeing more supplies finally being sent their way. As for the man who was writhing in agony on the ground, he asked one of his men to end his misery since his screams were hurting his ears. Yeah, they didn't even hesitate and immediately shut the man down, permanently. As for Turan, who was silently watching the whole scene unfold before his eyes, he realized he just made a mistake, since this man just ended a guy without a shred of guilt, clearly not the type of person he would want to owe a favor to. As that thought was going through his head, he heard a voice ringing through his mind. And upon listening closer, he heard the sound claiming it made a mistake because he wasn't the Night Hunter. Well, that's all for today, folks. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. And if you want to know what happens next, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, take care.